Welcome back to Potter Read, the channel where a single what if unspools a whole new history of the wizarding world. Today's story: Nicolas Flamel took an orphaned Harry at age 5 and raised him as his alchemical heir. If you haven't yet, go ahead and smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so a new tale never slips past you. Now settle in and let's begin. Chapter 1: The house that keeps its own time. The cupboard under the stairs at number 4 smelled of dust and floor polish, and faintly of the boy himself, who had learned by 5 years old that if he made no sound at all the day sometimes forgot about him. He lay on the thin mattress with his knees drawn up and listened to the house. Above him the stairs creaked as Dudley thundered down them, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a shower of grit sifted through the boards and settled in Harry's hair. He did not brush it out. Brushing it out meant moving, and moving meant the springs would sing, and the spring singing meant Aunt Petunia's voice through the door, sharp as a struck match. He was hungry in the particular way he had stopped noticing, the way you stop noticing the ticking of a clock. Supper last night had been a heel of bread pushed under the door on a saucer because he had let the eggs catch and burn, and Uncle Vernon believed that a boy who ruined breakfast could go without. Harry had eaten the bread in small mouthfuls to make it last and had saved the crust, which was still in his fist now, gone hard, warm from being held all night. That was the thing about Harry that the Dursleys never understood and never asked about. He saved things: bread, buttons, a chip of blue glass he had found in the gutter, a feather. He kept them in a hole in the mattress ticking where the stuffing had come loose, and at night he took them out one at a time and held them, and they were his, and no one could take them because no one knew they were there. The keeping mattered more than the things. He could not have said why. He was hot. He had been hot since the afternoon, a dry sick heat under his skin, and the cupboard, which was always cold, had gone strange around him. When he pressed his cheek to the wall, the plaster was cool for a moment and then warm, warm as a held crust, warm with a fever of its own. He was thirsty. He thought about the tap in the kitchen and the water going into a cupped hand, and he wanted it so badly that his eyes stung, and the light bulb over his head, which was switched off, which had been switched off for hours, gave a small tick and glowed. Harry watched it. It was not supposed to do that. It brightened until the filament inside was a bright coiled worm, brighter, until the glass sang a high thin note, and Harry's skin prickled all over, a nettle sting with no nettle in reach, and he wanted the water, and he wanted the dark, and he wanted, more than anything, to be somewhere that was not here, and the bulb burst. It did not pop. It came apart. The glass went to powder, and the powder hung in the air a moment in a little glittering cloud, turning before it fell, and the filament flared white, and then the cupboard was black and full of the smell of hot metal, and Harry was pressed into the corner with his hard crust of bread crushed in his hand, and his heart going like a trapped bird against his ribs. Feet on the stairs, not creaking, now pounding. The bolt on the door scraped. "What have you done?" The light fell in, and Uncle Vernon's face above it, purple, mouth working, and behind him Aunt Petunia with her hand at her throat, and Harry looked up at them out of the ruined dark and understood, the way small animals understand weather, that something had changed and that the change was not good for him. He had made the light break. He did not know how. He knew only that the wanting had come up out of him like something bright, and it had gone into the bulb, and the bulb had died of it, and that his uncle's face said, more plainly than any word, that this was the worst thing he had ever done, worse than the eggs, worse than growing his hair back overnight after Petunia cut it, worse than all of it put together. I didn't," Harry began, and Uncle Vernon reached in and got him by the front of Dudley's old jumper and lifted him clean off the mattress, and the little cash in the ticking spilled. The buttons, the blue glass, the feather, all of it, out onto the floor where anyone could see. Harry made a sound then, the only sound he made that whole night, not for himself but for the spilled things, a small torn noise, and he reached for them, and his uncle shook him until his teeth clicked and the reaching stopped. They did not hit him. That was the strange thing he would remember later, when he was warm and safe and old enough to look back at that boy in the cupboard and pity him. They did not hit him that night. They were afraid. He could smell it on them, sour under the polish. Uncle Vernon set him down hard in the hall and stood back from him with his fists at his sides, breathing through his nose, and Aunt Petunia said, in a voice Harry had never heard her use, thin and high, "Freak. You're a freak just like her, just like," and did not finish, and pressed her lips shut and would not look at him. They put him back in the cupboard with the door bolted and the light dead and the glass still on the floor, and Harry gathered up his spilled treasures in the dark by feel. The buttons cold, the blue glass with its clean edge, the feather, and he held them all in his 2 hands against his chest, and he did not cry because crying used up something he could not spare, and he waited for the sick heat to pass. It did not pass. It got worse. The plaster warmed under his cheek. Somewhere very far off or very deep, he thought he heard a bell. He did not know it, but that night the wards that a great and careful wizard had woven around number 4 Privet Drive 4 years before rang like a struck glass, all of them at once, and a silver instrument on a spindle-legged table in a distant round office gave a chime and a spin and a thread of smoke, and an old man with a long silver beard looked up from his work and went very still. Harry woke because the cupboard was gone. He knew it before he opened his eyes. The dark against his lids was the wrong dark, soft and moving, orange at the edges the way firelight moves, and the smell was all wrong, not dust and polish but wood smoke and something green and something sweet, bread maybe, and under it a mineral cold like the inside of a well. He was warm. He was lying on something that gave under him, deep and clean, and there was a weight over him that was heavier and kinder than any blanket he had ever had, and for one long moment he lay absolutely still with his eyes shut and did the arithmetic of a child who has been fooled before. If he opened his eyes it would be the cupboard. It was always the cupboard, better to keep the good dark a little longer. "He is awake," said a woman's voice, quite close, dry and unhurried. "You can stop pretending, little one, your breathing changed. I have watched a great many people sleep, and I know the difference." Harry opened his eyes. He was in a room the color of honey. Beams the color of old bread ran across a low white ceiling, and a fire burned in a stone hearth wide enough to walk into, and copper things hung on the wall and threw the firelight back soft and gold. He lay in a bed built into an alcove, under a quilt worked all over with threads that caught the light, moons and suns and long-tailed birds, and beside the bed in a rush-bottomed chair sat a woman. She was very old. He saw that first, the way a child sees it, in the loose soft skin of her hands folded in her lap and the white of her hair, which was pinned up and coming down. But her eyes, when he met them, were not old at all. Were dark and quick and interested, and they moved over his face the way Aunt Petunia's eyes moved over a shelf she was about to make him dust, missing nothing but without the wanting to find fault behind them. She wore a shawl the deep red of jam. Her hands were stained a little at the fingertips, green and gold, the way his own hands got stained when he weeded the flower beds, and seeing that stain without knowing why, Harry felt the smallest part of his fear let go. "There," she said, "that is better. You have Lily's eyes exactly. I did not think it would strike me so, but it does. Well." She reached to a low table and there was a bowl there, and she put it into his hands before he could decide whether to take it, so that he had to hold it or drop it, and he held it. It was warm all the way round. Soup, pale gold, with soft things floating in it and a smell that made the empty place inside him twist. "Small mouthfuls," the woman said. "You have not eaten properly in a long time. I can see it in your wrists. If you go too fast it will hurt you, and then you will be frightened of the soup, and that would be a great pity, because it is very good soup." "I made it slowly now." Harry looked at the soup. He looked at the woman. He did not move. She watched him understand his own trap, that to eat he would have to trust the bowl, and to trust the bowl was more than he knew how to do, and she did not hurry him. She took up a bit of knitting from her lap, blue wool, and her needles began to go click, click, unhurried as a clock, and she looked at the fire and not at him, and after a while, because she was not watching, Harry lifted the bowl and drank. It was very good soup. It was the best thing he had ever tasted. He drank it in small mouthfuls as she had told him to, because being told a rule and keeping it was a thing he understood, and the warmth went down into him and spread, and the shaking that he had not known was in him began to quiet. "My name is Perenelle," the woman said, still to the fire. "You will not manage it for a while, no one does. The children in the village call me Madame Nell when they are being polite, and other things when they are not. You may call me whatever you like, and you are Harry." He stopped drinking. "It is all right that you are Harry," she said. "You are safe here. That is a thing I will say to you many times, and you will not believe it for a long time, and that is all right too. I did not believe it either once a long time ago in a house that was not kind. Believing takes as long as it takes. You are not in trouble. You did nothing wrong. The light that broke was not a wicked thing. It was a frightened thing like you, and it will not happen here, because here there is nothing to be frightened." "Finish your soup." Harry finished his soup. The house, he would learn, was called La Source, which meant the spring because there was a spring, but that first day he learned only its rooms, one at a time, the way you learn a language, and he learned them holding tight to the woman's dry warm hand, because when she had stood to take the empty bowl he had, to his own horror, made a sound, and she had looked down at him and simply put out her hand, and he had taken it, and now he could not let it go. She did not seem to mind. She walked slowly for him. They went out of the honey-colored room into a passage with a floor of worn red brick, and the brick was warm underfoot, warm from beneath, and Perenelle said, "The spring runs under the house, and we keep it warm the winter through, so the floor is warm. You may go barefoot here and no one will scold you." And Harry, who had gone barefoot at Privet Drive only because his shoes had holes, felt the warm brick under his feet and did not understand why his throat hurt. They passed a room full of books. More books than Harry had known were in the world, floor to ceiling, with a ladder on a rail and a long table under a window and dust turning gold in a bar of light. They passed a kitchen with hanging bunches of dried leaves and strings of onions and a scrubbed table and a great black range that breathed heat, and a marmalade cat asleep on a chair who opened one eye at Harry and shut it again, unbothered. They passed a door that was shut, an old door, black oak with a great iron key in the lock, and from behind it came a red light, very faint, pulsing slow as breathing, and a warmth different from the fire's warmth, and a smell Harry had no word for, hot and clean and strange, like a coin held under the tongue, like the sky before thunder. Harry stopped in front of that door. He did not know he had stopped until Perenelle's hand went taut in his. "Ah," she said softly, "you feel it." "Of course you do, you would." She looked down at him and something crossed her face that he could not read, there and gone. That is the workroom, little one. It belongs to my husband, and one day perhaps it will belong to you, though that is a great way off and there is soup and sleeping and a great deal of ordinary living to do before then. It is not a frightening room. But it is not a room to go into alone, ever, not because you would be in trouble, but because the things in it are old and strong and do not know you yet, and a good rule with old strong things is to let them know you slowly. Do you understand? Harry did not really, but he understood the shape of the rule, and he nodded, and she seemed to think that was enough. Nicholas, she said, not loudly, to the shut door, come and meet him now. He is fed and he is on his feet, and a first meeting is better on your feet than flat in a bed. It lets a person run if he needs to. The door opened. The man who came out of the red light was the oldest person Harry had ever seen, older than Perenelle, older than the vicar at the church the Dursleys made him wait outside of, older than seemed possible for a person still walking around. He was thin and tall and slightly stooped, in a long dust-colored coat with the sleeves rolled and the front scorched here and there with little burns, and his hair and beard were white and wild and somewhat singed, and his hands, when Harry looked at them, were the hands of a man who worked, nicked, stained, sure. But it was the face that Harry looked at longest. It was a deeply lined face, all folds and creases, and it should have been frightening, and it was not, because every line in it ran upward toward the eyes, which were pale and bright and looked at Harry as if Harry were the single most interesting thing that had happened in a very great while. So, said Nicolas Flamel. His voice was low and gravelled and had a shape to it that was not quite English, a lift at the ends of the words. So, here you are, Perenelle. He is smaller than I expected. They kept him small, Perenelle said. On purpose or on carelessness, it comes to the same. We will unkeep him. We will. Nicholas lowered himself slowly, joint by joint, until he was crouched down on his heels at Harry's level. And even crouched he was tall, and he did not reach for Harry, did not pat his head or chuck his chin the way grown-ups did, but only looked at him, steady and kind and unhurried, and Harry, who had been looked at all his life as a nuisance or an accident or a thing to be got round, felt himself looked at as a person and did not know what to do with it. And looked at his own bare feet on the warm brick. I knew your grandfather, Nicholas said, and his grandfather a little and one before that. The Potters are an old family, and there was always one in each generation who came knocking at my door wanting to know how the world was put together underneath. You have that look. I saw it the moment Albus set you down on my hearthrug at 3 o'clock this morning, wrapped in a coat too big for you, fast asleep with your fists shut tight. A boy who wants to know how the world is put together underneath. He tilted his head. Do you want to know? Harry did not answer. He had learned not to answer questions from grown-ups because the questions were usually traps. But something in him leaned toward the old man the way a plant on a windowsill leans toward the light without deciding to, and Nicholas saw it, and the lines of his face ran further upward, and he got to his feet again slowly, holding the door frame. There is no hurry, he said. That is the first thing and the last thing and most of the things in between. There is no hurry. You have all the time in the world, little one. I have seen to that. Now, Perenelle, has he met Corbo? He has not. Then he must at once. Everything else can wait, but a boy should meet the raven on his first day. And Nicholas put 2 fingers to his mouth and whistled, one falling note, and from somewhere up in the dark beams of the passage there came a rustle and a heavy soft rush of wings, and a bird dropped down out of the shadows and landed on the old man's shoulder, and it was enormous, glossy black that was blue and green and purple where the firelight touched it, with an eye like a bead of jet, and it turned that eye on Harry and made a low chuckling sound deep in its throat, and Harry, before he could stop himself, before he could remember to be silent and small and safe, laughed. It was a small laugh, rusty, as if it did not get much use. But it was a laugh, and at the sound of it the marmalade cat lifted its head, and Perenelle's hand tightened once around his, gently, and Nicolas Flamel looked at his wife over the boy's head with an expression Harry did not see and would not have understood, the look of 2 people who have lived a very long time and thought they had felt everything there was to feel, discovering that they had been wrong. They were kind to him, and Harry did not trust it. He was 5, and he had lived his whole rememberable life in a place where kindness was a trick or a mistake, and so through that first strange golden day, he watched the Flamels the way you watch a dog you have been bitten by before, waiting for the turn. When Perenelle set a plate in front of him at the scrubbed kitchen table, bread, real bread, still warm, and butter, and honey, the deep gold of the room he had woken in, and a boiled egg with its top off, Harry ate half, and when he thought she was not looking, folded the rest into his sleeve. The bread and a wedge of the egg, quick and practiced to keep, because there was always a day coming when there would be nothing, and a boy who did not lay by against that day was a fool. Perenelle was looking. He knew she was looking because when he glanced up she was calmly over the rim of her cup, and his stomach dropped because this was it. This was the turn. Now she would drag him up by the arm and call him a thief and a freak and shut him somewhere. She said, the bread will go stale in your sleeve, and the egg will make a mess, and both would be a waste, which I cannot abide. If you want to keep food by you, that is a sensible thing to want, and I will not tell you to stop wanting it, because wanting is not something a person can be argued out of. So, She got up unhurried and went to a shelf and took down a small tin blue with a picture of a windmill on the lid, and she set it beside his plate. "This is yours. It has a good lid, nothing gets stale in it, and no mouse gets in. You may keep bread in it and cheese and whatever you like, and it is yours, and no one will take it or empty it or look inside without asking you. When it is empty, you may fill it. There will always be bread to fill it with. There will always be bread here, Harry, every day, for as long as you live, and longer. But it will take your stomach a while to believe your eyes, and until it does, you keep your tin." Harry looked at the blue tin. He looked at the bread and egg he had hidden in his sleeve. Very slowly, watching her the whole time for the trick, he took them out and put them in the tin and closed the lid, and it made a good sound, a tight small clop, and he kept his hand on it. "There," Perenelle said, and sat down again and drank her tea and said nothing more about it, and the trick did not come. It went on like that. Every time Harry braced for the turn did not come. When he broke a cup, a good cup, thin as an eggshell, that slipped from his wet hands as he tried, unasked, to wash it, because at Privet Drive the way to be less of a burden was to work. When it shattered on the flagstones and the pieces rang out bright, Harry went instantly small and still and put his back to the cupboard and his arms over his head, the old readiness, the body knowing before the mind what came after a broken good thing. And Nicholas, who was in the kitchen doorway, did not shout. He came and crouched down by the pieces and picked one up and turned it in the light and said, "Ah, this glaze. You see the little rainbow in it there at the broken edge? That is lead in the glaze, catching the light, splitting it the way rain splits the sun. A broken thing shows you its insides. That is the only good thing about breaking, but it is a real good thing." He looked up at the boy pressed into the cupboard with his arms over his head, and his creased face was gentle. "It is only a cup, Harry. We have too many cups. Perenelle has been trying to be rid of this set for 100 years. You have done us a kindness. Come and see the rainbow before we sweep it up." And Harry, because he could not help it, because the word rainbow was in the man's mouth and no blow had come, lowered his arms and came and looked, and there in the broken edge of the cup was a thin bar of color, red bleeding to gold to green to blue, hidden inside the plain white glaze all this time, and he had never known that a white cup had colors inside it waiting to be broken open, and something in his chest hurt and eased at once. "Everything has colors inside it," Nicholas said, sweeping the pieces into his cupped palm unbothered by the edges. "Everything, if you know how to make it show you. That is a great part of what I do in the room with the red light. I make things show me their insides. It is slow work and mostly it does not go, and then once in a great while it goes, and it is the most beautiful thing there is." He tipped the broken cup into the bin. "But that is for later. Today you have only to be here and eat and sleep and get less small. That is a full day's work for a person, getting less small. I know, I have done it myself." In the late afternoon, when the light in the kitchen had gone amber and slantwise and Sen and the cat had claimed the last warm square of it on the flagstones, Nicholas came and sat down across the scrubbed table from Harry and set between them a small square of black slate, and on the slate a single old iron nail. Harry looked at the nail. It was a plain thing, hand-forged, rough, its head hammered square, its point gone dull with rust the color of dried blood. It was the sort of thing you found in a gutter and put in your pocket and kept, and Harry, who kept such things, felt the old pull toward it, the wanting to close his hand round it and make it his. "You looked at the door with the red light behind it," Nicholas said, "and you felt it in your chest, and you stopped without meaning to. I saw, Perenelle saw. That is not a thing most people do. Most people walk past that door and feel nothing at all because they have taught themselves not to feel it, which is a great sadness and takes years of hard work to accomplish." He turned the nail a little with one stained finger. "You have not learned to not feel yet. Good, do not learn it. Now I am going to show you a very small thing. It is the smallest cousin of the great work I do behind that door, a nursery rhyme beside a symphony, a puddle beside the sea. But it is real and it is true, and I have never once shown it to a person on his first day under this roof, because I have never before had a person under this roof on his first day who wanted to know how the world is put together underneath. Watch the nail, do not watch my hands, the hands are nothing, the nail is everything." Harry watched the nail. Nicholas took from his coat a small glass phial of liquid the pale blue-green of a robin's egg, and he unstoppered it, and there was a smell like a coin under the tongue, like the workroom door, and he let fall onto the head of the iron nail one single drop, no more, and stoppered the phial again and folded his scarred hands on the table and did nothing else at all. For a moment nothing happened. The drop sat on the iron, blue-green, trembling. Then at its edge, where the blue met the gray, a thread of color woke. It was not the color of the drop, and it was not the color of the nail. It was the warm red gold of a new penny, and it came out of the iron the way frost comes out of a window pane, not laid on top but growing from within, spreading in fine branching lines, and where the lines met they thickened, and where they thickened they budded, and the buds opened, slow, unhurried, into little roses. That was the only word Harry had for them, tiny blooms of bright soft copper, red and gold and warm, crowding up out of the cold gray iron along the whole length of the nail until the plain rusted thing lay on the black slate wearing a whole small garden of metal flowers that had not been there a minute before. Harry did not breathe, he had forgotten to. He reached out one finger and stopped and looked at Nicholas, asking without words, and Nicholas nodded, and Harry touched one of the copper roses with the very tip of his finger. It was cool, it was solid, it was real. It did not brush away. It was a flower, and it was metal, and it had come out of a rusty nail while he watched, and there was no trick in it, no turn, nothing snatched away. The old man had made a dead gray thing bloom for no reason at all except to show him. "Why?" Harry said. It was the first word he had spoken all day. His voice came out cracked and small from long disuse. "Why did you? How did it?" "Ah," said Nicholas, and every line in his ancient face ran upward toward his pale, bright eyes. "How and why?" Those are the only two questions worth asking, and you have asked them both in your first sentence. It will take me the rest of my life and the whole of yours to answer them properly, and we shall have a wonderful time of it. The short answer for today is this: nothing in the world is only what it looks like. That nail looked like iron, only iron, dull and finished and done. But inside the iron was the memory of copper, and copper is the metal of Venus, the metal that blooms, and all I did was ask it, very politely and very patiently, to remember. That is the whole of my art, Harry, from the smallest Rustrows to the greatest work behind that door. It is only asking things to remember what else they might be. And the secret of it, the whole secret, the one that took me 100 years to learn and that I am giving you for nothing on your first day because you have Lily's eyes and you asked how, the secret is that you cannot force it, you cannot hurry it. You can only ask and tend and wait. The work is slow. He nudged the flowered nail across the slate until it lay in front of Harry. This is yours, keep it. Every alchemist should own one true thing that reminds him the world is more than it looks. That is yours. Harry closed his hand around the copper-flowered nail, and it was cool and solid in his, and he did not hide it in a sleeve or a hole in a mattress. He held it in the open in his fist on the table where anyone could see, and he looked at the old man across the amber light, and he did not have a word yet for what had come loose in him, so he said nothing and kept the nail, and that was enough. Night came early to the coombe, folding blue and then purple down over the valley, and Perenelle lit lamps that were not electric, that had no bulbs to burst warm little flames under glass. And the marmalade cat, whose name was Senan, came and sat on the hearth and washed, and Harry, full of soup and bread and a whole day's careful watching, could not keep his eyes open, and would not let them close, because closing them meant the day ending, and he did not know what the next day would be. And the not knowing was worse now than it had ever been, because now there was something to lose. Perenelle saw. She saw most things. She took him back to the honey-colored room, the bed built into the wall, the quilt with the moons and suns, and Harry stood in the middle of the floor and did not get in because the bed was too good, and a boy learned early not to get used to good things, because getting used to them was how they hurt you when they went. He stood on the warm floor in a nightshirt of Perenelle's making, soft, too big, the sleeves rolled, and he looked at the good bed and could not make himself want it out loud. "I know," Perenelle said. She sat down in the rush-bottomed chair. "You are thinking it is too good and it will be taken away, and so it is safer not to love it. That is a wise thing to think in the wrong house. This is not the wrong house, but I cannot make you believe that tonight, and I will not try. So here is what we will do. I will sit here in this chair all the night through. I do not sleep much anymore. I have done a great deal of sleeping in my time, and I find I would rather be awake. I will be here when you close your eyes, and I will be here when you open them. And if you wake in the dark and are afraid, you have only to say my name, even the wrong version, even Madame, even just a sound, and I will answer, so that you know the dark has someone in it who is on your side. Will that do?" Harry looked at her a long time. Then he got into the bed. The quilt came up over him heavy and kind. He lay on his side facing her, and he put one hand out from under the quilt and set it on the edge of the mattress, palm up, not reaching, not quite, just there in the open, the way you leave a hand out for an animal to come to if it likes. Perenelle looked at the open hand. She did not take it. She understood that taking it would be too much, that the hand was a question and not yet an invitation. Instead, she laid two of her stained fingers against the boy's open palm, light as a leaf, so that he could pull away if he liked, and Harry did not pull away, and after a while his fingers curled loosely around hers and his eyes closed and did not open, and his breathing went slow and deep and even, the breathing of a child who has, for one night at least, set down the whole weight of himself. Nicholas came to the doorway later when the fire had burned low and stood there in the dark, and Perenelle looked up at him over the sleeping child, her fingers still caught loosely in his small fist. "Albus will want him back," she said very quietly, "when it is safe. That was the arrangement. A season," he said, "until the trouble at that dreadful house settles and a better place is found." "I heard the arrangement," Nicholas said. "He has hidden a tin of bread in his sleeve twice today, against a famine that is over, and he flinched from a broken cup like a dog that has been kicked, and he did not know his own name was allowed to be said aloud." Perenelle's voice did not rise, but there was iron in it, old iron, the kind that has held up a great deal for a very long time. "A season will not undo that, Nicholas. A season is a plaster on a broken bone." Nicholas was quiet. The red light from under the workroom door lay along the passage behind him, faint, patient breathing. "You know what we are," he said. "You know what it costs to be near us. You know who will come in time, sniffing after the thing we keep, and what it would mean for a child to be under this roof when they do. We stopped a long time ago, letting ourselves love small perishable things because we outlived them, and it broke us over and over until we learned better. We agreed. Do you remember? We agreed we were done with that particular grief. I remember, said Perenelle. So did I until 3 o'clock this morning. Nicholas came into the room. He looked down at the boy, at the wild black hair against the pillow, at the thin white scar on the brow that even sleep did not smooth, the scar that was not a scar as other scars are, that Nicholas had felt from across the room like a cold spot in a warm bath, a place where the world had been torn and badly mended. Wants to know how the world is put together underneath, the old man said. I have taught a great many clever people in 600 years. I have never once in all that time had one come to me already wanting it, before he could read, before he could be spoiled by wanting anything else. It is the rarest thing there is, rarer than the stone. He was silent a moment. A season, he said, and there was something in his voice that was almost a laugh and almost not. We shall see about a season. Perenelle looked down at the sleeping boy, at her fingers in his fist. Yes, she said, we shall. Harry woke once deep in the night, out of a dream of the cupboard, of the light bursting, of the spilled treasures on the floor, and he came up out of it with a jolt, gasping, not knowing where he was, the good dark gone strange and full of shapes, and the old readiness flooded him, the readiness to be small, to be silent, to be nothing until the danger passed. I am here, said a dry voice in the dark, close by, calm as the spring under the floor. It is Perenelle. You are at Lost Source in the room with the moons on the quilt, and it is the middle of the night and nothing is wrong. You had a dream. Dreams cannot follow you out of sleep, they have no legs. I am here. Go back down, little one. I will keep the dark. And Harry, who had never in his life had someone keep the dark for him, lay back down and found the dry, warm fingers still there where he had left them, and held them, and the shapes in the dark went back to being a chair, a quilt, a low red gleam of banked fire, and he slept and did not dream again. In the morning there was bread as promised and honey, and his blue tin on the shelf with yesterday's saved crust still in it, untouched, unlooked at, exactly as he had left it. And there was something else. On the table by his bed, where a lamp would be in another house, someone had set a thing to be his nightlight, and it was not a lamp, and it was not electric, and it could not burst. A shallow dish of water with a single small stone at the bottom, and the stone gave off a light, soft, steady gold, no flame, no wire, just a stone that glowed the way a coal glows without burning, warm and low and endless, and beside it a card in a spidery old-fashioned hand read for Harry, so the dark always has a light in it. N.F. Harry looked at the glowing stone in its dish of water for a long time. Then very carefully, checking twice that no one was watching, he did not hide it away in a hole in a mattress. He left it where it was, out in the open on the table, being his, and he understood, in the wordless way of a small child who has decided something before he knows he has decided it, that he was not going to give this stone back, and he was not going to give the tin back, and he was not going to give the dry warm hand in the dark back, not for a season, not for anything, and if the turn came, if the trick came, if it was all going to be snatched away the way good things always were, well, he would keep them as long as he could. The keeping mattered more than the fear of losing. It always had. Down the passage, behind the black oak door, the red light pulsed slow and patient in the dark, breathing, keeping its own time, waiting, as it had waited across 6 centuries, for a hand that wanted to know how the world was put together underneath. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2 First Principles. The season that Dumbledore had asked for came and went, and no one said anything about it, and that was how Harry knew he was staying. Autumn thinned the coombe. The orchard went from green to gold to bare, and the leaves came down in slow spirals that Harry learned to catch, one at a time, in his cupped hands, because Perenelle had told him that a person who could catch a falling leaf had good hands for the work, and Harry wanted good hands for the work more than he had ever wanted anything, though he could not have said what the work was. He only knew it lived behind the black oak door in the red light, and that Nicholas went to it every morning and came out smelling of hot metal and thunder, and that one day, perhaps, if his hands were good enough, it would let him in. He still kept the blue tin. He filled it and refilled it, and some mornings he woke with his hand already reaching for it before his eyes were open, checking, the way you check for a tooth with your tongue. But the bread in it had begun to go stale, because he was not eating it, because there was always fresh bread warm on the table, every single day, exactly as Perenelle had promised, and a boy cannot eat his emergency and his breakfast both. One gray morning Perenelle found him standing at the shelf with the open tin in his hands and a look on his face that she read as she read everything, quickly and without comment. The tin was full. It had been full for a week. The bread in it had gone hard and freckled with the beginnings of green. Ah, she said, she did not take the tin. She had learned in her long life that the fastest way to lose a thing was to reach for it. Your stores have turned, that happens. Bread is a living thing, and living things do not keep forever, no matter how carefully you hoard them. It is not a failing in you, it is a fact about bread. She wiped her hands on her apron. Come. We will not waste it, because I cannot abide waste, but we will not eat it either, because I cannot abide the bellyache. There is a third thing to do with old bread, and it is the best thing, and I will show you. They took the stale bread out to the orchard, and Perenelle showed him how to crumble it small between his fingers, and they scattered it under the bare trees, and within a minute the birds came, a whole gossiping parliament of them, chaffinches and a robin and a squabble of sparrows, and dropping down heavy and unbothered through the middle of them Corbeau, who took the largest piece and sat on a low branch and ate it while he watched Harry with his jet bead of an eye. "There," said Perenelle, "your emergency spent." "Not lost, spent, there is a difference, and it is the whole difference in the world. A thing hoarded rots, a thing spent well feeds something." She crumbled a last handful and let it fall. "You may keep filling the tin as long as you need to, little one, but once a week we will bring the old bread here, you and I, and spend it so that it never turns again. That will be our arrangement. Does it suit you?" Harry watched Corbeau finish the crust and clean his great black beak against the branch. The birds were loud and quick and glad, and the bread that had been going to waste in a tin was inside them now, warm, being turned into flying. He thought about that. He thought about it for a long time, as he did most things, without letting any of it onto his face. "It suits me," he said. It was the longest sentence he had spoken since he came, and Perenelle, who had waited weeks for a whole sentence and would have waited years, only nodded, no more troubled than by a change in the weather, and said, "Good. Then that is settled. Now let us go in before the robin decides we are his." The lessons began without Harry noticing they had begun. That was Nicholas's way. He did not sit Harry down at a desk and say, "Now you will learn alchemy," the way Aunt Petunia had once sat Dudley down and said, "Now you will learn your letters," with a smack of the book on the table and a look that promised trouble. Nicholas simply started including Harry in things, small things, and asking him to look, and the looking turned out to be the lesson. "Come and watch the kettle," Nicholas said one afternoon, and Harry, who had been half asleep by the range with Sen and a warm weight on his feet, came and watched the kettle. It was an ordinary copper kettle on the range, and it was heating, and Nicholas pulled up a stool for the boy and one for himself, and they sat and watched it, and nothing happened, and Harry waited for the point. "What do you see?" Nicholas asked. "A kettle. What is it doing? Getting hot. How do you know? You have not touched it." Harry looked. The kettle sat there, copper, dull, ordinary. But now that he looked, really looked, the way looking was apparently a thing you could do harder. He saw that the air above the spout had gone strange, wavering, bending the shelf behind it out of true. And there was a sound, very low, that had not been there a minute ago, a thin singing hum coming up out of the water inside. "Air's wobbly," Harry said, "over the top, and it's making a noise, a quiet one, like he hunted for it, like it's thinking about something." Nicholas made a sound in his chest that Harry would come to know very well, a low, pleased rumble, the sound of a man whose bird has done a clever trick. "Like it is thinking about something. Yes, that is exactly right, and it is better than the word most grown men would use, which is convection, and which tells you nothing. The water is thinking about becoming air. It is getting ready. It does not leap straight from cold to boiling. Nothing in the world leaps straight from one thing to another, though people are always in a hurry to believe it does. It warms, and it stirs, and it hums, and it thinks about it, and only then, when it is good and ready, does it change." He nodded at the kettle. "Watch it change. Do not look away, or you will miss the moment, and the moment is the only part worth seeing." So Harry watched and did not look away, and his eyes stung with not blinking, and the hum climbed, and the wavering air thickened, and then, all at once, and yet not all at once, the way a wave both breaks suddenly and has been building the whole way in, the water boiled. It shouldered up against the lid and rattled it and sent a white plume out of the spout, and Harry had watched the exact moment when thinking about it became doing it, and it was, in its small way, the second most extraordinary thing he had seen after the rust roses. "There," Nicholas said, and lifted the kettle off the heat. "You saw it. Most people never do. They put the kettle on and go and read the newspaper and come back to a thing already boiling and think, 'Ah, it boiled,' and take the boiling for the whole story. But the boiling is only the last word of a long sentence, and the sentence is the interesting part. Everything is like that, Harry, everything. The whole of my art is only this, learning to watch the sentence and not just read the last word." He set the kettle down. "That is your first lesson. There will be a great many, and they will all, in the end, be that same lesson, wearing different clothes. Now, shall we have the tea we have gone to such trouble to make?" Perenelle kept bees. The hives stood at the top of the walled garden, 5 of them, old straw skeps gone silver with weather, and on warm days the air around them was thick with a drowsy roar that Harry could feel in his teeth. He was afraid of them at first, the way any sensible 5-year-old is afraid of 1,000 stinging things at once, and Perenelle did not tell him not to be afraid, because she did not tell people not to feel things. "They will not sting you if you are slow," she said instead. "Bees hate hurry. A hurried hand near a hive is a threat, and they answer threats the only way they can. But a slow hand, an unhurried hand, a hand that has all the time in the world that they will walk across as if it were a branch. Watch." And she put her bare wrinkled hand, slow, so slow it hardly seemed to move at all, flat against the mouth of a hive, and the bees crawled up over her stained fingers, gold and black and busy, and did not sting her, and she stood with 100 bees walking on her hand and looked back at Harry with her dark, quick eyes. Slowness is a kind of safety, remember that. Half of what you will learn in this house is only different ways of saying, "Do not hurry." Harry did not put his hand to the hive that day or for many days. But he sat with Perenelle among the bees in the warm afternoons, and she taught him their business, how they were three kinds: the queen who was the whole heart of the hive, the workers who were her daughters and did everything, and the drones who were her sons and did almost nothing and were turned out to die when winter came, which Harry thought was hard and said so. "It is hard," Perenelle agreed. "The world is often hard, and a bee's world hardest of all. But the hive is not cruel, it is only thrifty, and thrift and cruelty look alike from the outside and are not at all the same underneath. The hive spends nothing it does not need to spend. It is the wisest housekeeper there is." She turned a frame in the light, heavy and gold and dripping. "There are three things in everything, my husband will tell you when he gets round to it. Three principles, the alchemists call them, and they give them grand names: salt and sulfur and mercury, and draw them as signs. But you may meet them here first in the hive in plain clothes. The wax is the body that holds its shape and stays, that is the salt of the thing. The bee's fierce quick spirit, that flies and stings and will not be told, that is the mercury. And the honey, the sweetness, the soul of all that flying labor gathered into one gold thing, that is the sulfur, though it is a poor name for something so sweet." She held out the frame. "Taste the soul of the hive, little one. You have earned it, sitting so still." "Which one am I?" Harry asked, before he had decided to ask it, the honey still on his tongue. "Salt or mercury or the soul one?" Perenelle considered him. She did not laugh, though a person might have, at so large a question out of so small a boy. "That is the right question," she said, "and no one can answer it for you, and it changes across a life besides. But I will tell you what I see today, and you may argue with me when you are grown. Today you are mostly salt. You hold your shape, you keep. You have kept yourself whole through a great deal that would have crumbled another child to powder, and you did it by staying, by being solid, by not letting go of the little you had. That is salt, and it is nothing to be ashamed of. Salt is the body of the world, the part that stays when everything else has flown away. But there is mercury in you too, coming up like green under snow, the quick part, the part that catches a falling leaf and reads a hard word and sees a false birdwatcher in a lane. And the sulfur, the soul, the sweetness, that is asleep in you still, because it was never given a summer to gather in. We will see to that. That is half of why you are here. A hive with no flowers makes no honey, and it is not the hive's fault. It is only that no one planted it a garden." She closed the comb away. "We are your garden now, little one, grow." Harry tasted the honey off the comb, and it was warm, and it tasted of the whole summer at once, of clover and lime blossom in the hot-walled garden, and it was Perenelle's word soul in his mouth, and he understood in the wordless way that he was being taught something enormous through something small, and that this was how everything in this house would be taught to him always, forever, and that he did not mind. He minded nothing here. That was the strange new fact of his life, and he turned it over and over like a chip of blue glass. He minded nothing here. It was Perenelle, too, who taught him his letters in the evenings by the fire, tracing them large on a slate, and Harry took to reading the way the orchard took to spring, all at once and with a kind of greed, because behind every book on the long shelves was a thing someone had seen and written down, and Harry wanted to see everything anyone had ever seen. He was slow to speak still, he was quick to read. Within a season he could pick his way through the picture books Perenelle found for him, and then the easier of the real books, sounding out the long words under his breath, and once sounding out a name in a book of old family trees Perenelle had left open. He came to a word and stopped and sat very still, and Perenelle looked over and saw which word it was. The word was Potter. "That is you," Perenelle said gently. "That is your family." They were an old and good family, and clever and kind more often than not, which is rarer than clever. Your father's name was James, and he was brave and a little foolish in the way that brave young men are, and your mother's name was Lily, and she had your eyes, or rather you have hers, and she was the cleverest witch of her age, they say, and she loved you past the edge of the world. You know that already, somewhere under everything. You were too small to keep the memory, but the love did not need you to keep it. It kept you. She closed the book, not to hide it, but gently, the way you close a door on a warm room to keep the heat in. You may ask me anything you like about them whenever you like, and I will tell you the truth always, even the hard parts, because you are the sort of person who would rather have a hard truth than a soft lie. But you need not ask tonight. Tonight you have learned to read your own name, and that is a great deal for one evening. Come, there is milk." Harry did not ask that night. But he lay awake a long time after, in the light of the little glowing stone, saying the word to himself, "Potter, Potter," tasting it as he had tasted the honey, and thinking that it was his, that it had always been his, and that no one here would ever try to take it away. The stranger came in the last week of November. Harry saw him first, which was a thing he would remember with a private, complicated pride for years, because he saw him before Corbo did, and Corbo saw most things. Harry was up in the bare apple tree at the edge of the orchard, where the land dropped away toward the lane and the far grey roofs of Witchcombe village, and he was watching the light do the thing it did on winter afternoons, going thin and gold and sad all at once, when he saw a man standing in the lane where no one ever stood. The man had a pair of field glasses and a green coat and a little book, and to anyone else he would have looked like exactly what he was pretending to be, which was a bird watcher out in the cold looking at winter birds. But Harry had spent 5 years learning to read the small print of grown-ups, the difference between a person doing a thing and a person pretending to do a thing, and this man was pretending. He held the field glasses up, but he was not looking at birds, he was looking at the house. And when he lowered the glasses to write in his little book, he did not look down at the book the way a real birdwatcher would, checking a bird against a picture. He kept his eyes on the house and wrote without looking, the way you write when what you are writing down is not birds at all. Harry came down out of the tree, slow, the way Perenelle had taught him to move near the bees, and he went inside and found Nicholas at the kitchen table with a book, and he said, "There's a man in the lane pretending to look at birds and really looking at the house." Nicholas put down his book. Everything about him changed, without any single thing about him seeming to move. He had been an old man reading. He was, of a sudden, something older and more awake, and Harry saw for the first time that the warm-creased grandfather and the master of the red-lit room were the same person wearing the same face, and that the second one had been there all along underneath, the way the boiling had been there all along underneath the cold water. "Show me," Nicholas said, "from the small window on the stair where he cannot see us look. Quietly now, you have done exactly right, Harry." Exactly right, and he put his scarred hand for a moment on the top of Harry's head light, and it was the first time he had touched him at all, and then it was gone and they were going up the stairs on soft feet to look. The man was still there. Nicholas looked at him for a long moment through the wavy old glass, unmoving, and then he made a low sound that was not the pleased rumble. "Corbo," he said not loudly, and the raven came from somewhere and lit on the windowsill, and Nicholas said something to him in a language Harry did not know, old and rolling, and the raven dropped from the sill and went out over the orchard, black against the thin gold light, and flew a wide, slow circle over the lane, high up once, and came back. And whatever the raven had seen, Nicholas read it in him, as he read everything. "He is from the ministry," Nicholas said quietly, more to himself than to Harry. "A junior one sent to watch and not to act. You can tell by the coat. They always overdo the coat. They have noticed. Of course they have noticed. A famous child cannot simply vanish from the map of the world without someone, sooner or later, wondering where the map went blank." He drew back from the window. "You need not be afraid, Harry. He cannot see the house, not truly. The house does not wish to be seen, and it is very good at not being seen. It has had 600 years of practice. He sees a fold in the land and a feeling that he ought to look elsewhere, and in an hour he will go home and write in his little book that there was nothing here but birds, but he is a sign of weather, and when the weather changes, one writes to one's oldest friend." He was already turning for the stairs, already somewhere else in his head. "Come. We must send an owl to Albus." Dumbledore came 2 days later, and he came the ordinary way, up the lane on foot in a plum-colored traveling cloak, so that anyone watching would see only an eccentric old man visiting an eccentric old couple, which was, Harry supposed, exactly the truth. Harry had been told he was coming, and told a little of who he was, the headmaster of the school Harry would go to one day, and the man who had carried Harry here, asleep, on the worst night of his short life, and Nicholas's friend of more than 100 years. Harry watched him come up the path from the small stair window, and what he saw was a very old man, older even than Nicholas in some way that had nothing to do with years, with a long silver beard tucked into his belt and half-moon spectacles, and eyes of a blue so pale and bright that even from up here Harry felt them go over the house and over the orchard and over, for just a moment, the very window Harry was hiding behind, and pause there, and know he was seen. They had tea in the honey-colored room, the four of them, which Harry felt was a great honor, being included, and he sat on a stool by Perenelle and drank his milk and watched and listened and said nothing, which was still his best thing. The grown-ups talked about grown-up matters, in the careful sideways way grown-ups did when a child was in the room, and Harry understood perhaps half of it and remembered all of it to think about later. He understood that the place he had lived before with the Dursleys had had a protection on it, something built out of his mother's love and his aunt's blood, and that leaving it had cost him that protection, and that Dumbledore had not wanted him to leave it and had let him leave it anyway, because a protection that keeps out your enemies is worth nothing if it does not also keep in your happiness, and Harry had been drowning in that house slowly, where no eye could see. He understood that Dumbledore was sorry. It was in the old man's voice, under the lightness, a low true note of sorrow, and Harry believed it and forgave him for it without being asked, because Dumbledore was the reason he was here, in the warm, with the honey and the moons on the quilt, and a boy could forgive a great deal for that. And he understood, too, that there was a disagreement, gentle and very old, running under the whole conversation like the spring ran under the house. "You know what I keep here, Albus," Nicholas said at one point, quiet, turning his teacup in his scarred hands. "You know better than any living man save myself. You know what it draws. There are those in the world who would walk barefoot over broken glass from here to Jerusalem for 1 hour alone in my workroom, and some of them are patient, and some of them are not, and the impatient ones are the ones who get people killed. To bring a child under this roof is to set that child down in the one place on earth where the wolves are always, always circling. I did not ask myself whether it was wise. I knew it was not wise. I did it anyway, and I would do it again, and I want you to tell me I am a foolish old man for doing it." "You are a foolish old man," Dumbledore said, and there was a warmth in it and a sadness, "and so am I, and we have both been foolish old men for a very long time, and the world is not much the worse for it." He set down his cup. "I will not pretend the danger is small. It is not small. But I have thought about it a great deal, my friend, and I have come to believe that there is no safe place for this particular child, none anywhere, and that if he cannot be safe he had better at least be loved and taught and made strong. A locked box is safe, and nothing grows in it. You have never in 6 centuries been able to resist teaching the one person who genuinely wanted to learn." His pale eyes moved to Harry and rested there, kind and bright and unhurried, and under the kindness measuring, weighing the way Harry had seen Perenelle weigh honey. "And I think this one genuinely wants to learn, don't you, Harry?" It was the first time anyone had spoken to Harry directly in an hour, and he felt all three of the old people looking at him, and the question hung in the warm air. He thought about lying because lying to grown-ups was safe, and then he thought that there was no lying in this house, that Perenelle had promised him the truth always and he owed her the same, and so he told the truth. "I want to know how the world's put together underneath," Harry said. "Mr. Flamel says that's the whole of it. I want that more than anything." Something moved behind Dumbledore's spectacles, quick there and gone, and he reached into his cloak and brought out, of all things, a small paper bag and opened it, and inside were sweets, yellow ones, and he held it out to Harry across the low table. "A sherbet lemon," he said. "They are a Muggle sweet, and quite the best thing the Muggles have ever invented, in my considered opinion, and I have considered the matter for a great many years. You may have one if your guardians permit." Perenelle inclined her head, permitting. Harry reached out and took a single sweet from the bag, and Dumbledore watched his hand do it, watched which sweet he chose and how many he took, and Harry, who had learned to read the small print, understood that this too was a kind of looking, that the sweet was a question and his taking of it was an answer, though he did not know to what. He took one, only one. He did not grab, and he did not take a fistful against a famine, and he said thank you, and he put it in his mouth, and it was sharp and then sweet, sour going to gold, the way the honey had been, the way everything good in his new life seemed to be, and he thought, without knowing he was being tested, that he had passed something. "Thank you," said Dumbledore quite softly, as though Harry had given him something rather than the other way round, and he closed the bag and put it away, and turned back to the grown-up talk, and did not look at Harry directly again. But Harry felt himself looked at, all the same, all afternoon, the way you feel the sun on the back of your neck even when your eyes are somewhere else. When the light was failing and Dumbledore had risen to go, Nicholas set a hand on Harry's shoulder and said, gently, "There is one thing more, and it concerns you, and so you shall be here for it and not spoken about behind a door, because I do not do that to people in my house. Will you let me look at the mark on your brow, not to fix it, only to see it? Seeing is the whole of what I do." Harry pushed the hair back from his forehead. He knew the scar was there, thin, white, shaped like a stroke of lightning frozen in the act of falling, because Aunt Petunia had told him in the old life that he had got it in the car crash that killed his careless parents, which he now understood was a lie stacked on a lie. He had never much thought about it. It did not hurt. It had never hurt. It hurt now. As Nicholas leaned close, and Dumbledore too, and a soft light woke at the tip of the wand the headmaster held near it, the scar came alive under Harry's skin, a cold, deep ache with a pulse in it, and he made a sound and put his own hand up to cover it, and the ache eased the moment the wand light drew back. The two old men looked at each other over the boy's head. Neither said anything for a moment, and the not saying was louder than words. "You feel it too, then," Dumbledore said at last, very low. "I have felt it since Albus set him on my hearth," Nicholas answered. His pale eyes had gone remote, the eyes of the man from the red-lit room, reading a thing no one else could read. "A cold place in a warm child, and not the fire will not loosen. I have spent my life teaching iron to remember it was once something else, teaching lead to let go of its heaviness, teaching the fixed to fly and the flying to settle. And here in this small brow is a thing that will not be taught. It sits, it waits. It is not of the boy, and it will not dissolve out of him, and I do not yet know what it is, only what it is like, and what it is like I do not care for at all." He drew the hair gently back down over the scar with one scarred finger covering it, kind. "But that is a worry for slow days and long study, and not for a child's bedtime. You have carried it 5 years and felt nothing, Harry. You may carry it a while longer while wiser heads than yours puzzle at it. It does not make you less. If anything," and here the remoteness left him and the grandfather came back into his face, "it makes you more interesting, and I have already told you that interesting is the finest thing a person can be." Dumbledore put his wand away and looked down at Harry with his pale, bright kindness, and under it that other thing, the weighing, gone careful now, gone almost gentle. "Guard him well, Nicholas," he said, though he was looking at Harry when he said it. "Both of them," said Perenelle from the doorway, with the tin of leftover sherbet lemons Dumbledore had somehow left behind already in her hand. "Guard both of them, for I have grown fond of the pair of you old fools, and I will not be left the only ancient thing in this house." And that made even Dumbledore smile, and the dark of the conversation lifted, and he went out into the winter dusk the ordinary way, down the lane on foot, an eccentric old man who had visited an eccentric old couple, leaving behind a boy who lay awake that night with his fingers resting light on the thin white scar, feeling for the cold place and finding it quiet and keeping, without being asked, the secret that it was there. Winter closed its fist on the comb, and Nicholas gave Harry his first real task. It was not a grand task. Harry had half hoped, in the private greedy chamber of his heart, for something grand, for the black door to open, for the red light, for the rust roses again, but bigger. What Nicholas gave him instead was a small iron lamp, an old one, shaped like a little boat with a wick at the prow, and a jar of clear oil, and a place for it on the workroom windowsill, which was as near the workroom as Harry was yet allowed, and a single instruction. "Keep it lit," Nicholas said. "That is all. From when you wake until you sleep, this flame will burn, and you will keep it burning, and you will keep it even. Not high, a high flame gutters and smokes and eats its oil and dies young like a foolish man. Not low, a low flame starves and shivers and goes out at the first draught. Even, a steady even flame all the day long that you feed before it is hungry and trim before it smokes and shelter before the wind finds it. That is the whole task. It is the oldest task there is. Every alchemist since the first one has learned it, and most of them hated it, and the ones who did not hate it were the ones who came to anything." He looked at Harry with his pale bright eyes. "The furnace behind that door, the Athanor we call it, the one that keeps its own fire, has burned without going out for longer than any kingdom on this earth has stood, longer than England. It has never once died because it has never once been left. That is what fire is, Harry. Fire is a thing that lives only as long as it is tended, and dies the moment it is not, and in that it is exactly like every other thing worth having. Keep the lamp. Come to me when you understand why it was worth doing." Harry kept the lamp. He was bad at it at first. He was bad at it in the exact way Nicholas must have known he would be bad at it, which was that he could not leave it alone. He watched it, and it burned even and steady and beautiful, and the steadiness bored him because nothing was happening, and boredom in Harry was a live and dangerous thing, the itch of a quick mind with nowhere to go. And so he trimmed the wick that did not need trimming, and it flared, and he pinched it back, and it guttered, and he added oil it did not need, and it swam and smoked and blackened the little chimney. And by noon of the first day the flame was a sooty, sickly, staggering thing, half drowned in its own oil, and Harry sat and looked at what his hurry had made and felt the old readiness come, the wanting to be small, because he had ruined the task, and ruined tasks meant nothing. Ruined tasks here meant nothing, except a thing to learn from. He knew that now. He made himself sit still and not fix it, which was the hardest thing he had done since he came, harder than the bees, harder than the honesty, and he watched the drowning flame, and he saw, slowly, that it did not want his help. It had been fine. It had been perfectly fine, even and steady in content, and every single thing he had done to help it had hurt it, because it had not needed helping, it had needed leaving, and the tending it wanted was not the frantic fussing of a boy who could not bear for nothing to be happening, but the light, patient, almost nothing attention of a hand that trusts the fire to know its own business. He cleaned the chimney. He set the wick right. And then he sat with his hands in his lap and did the impossible thing, the thing the whole task had been about from the start. He let it burn and did not touch it, and only watched, and fed it a little oil when it was truly low and not before, and trimmed the wick once at dusk when it truly smoked and not before, and the flame steadied and evened and burned all the short winter afternoon, gold and low and alive, tended by a hand that had finally learned to hold still. When Nicholas came at nightfall, the lamp was burning even. He looked at it a long time. He looked at the clean chimney and the trimmed wick and the low gold steady flame, and then he looked at Harry, who had oil on his fingers and soot on his nose and a stillness in him that had not been there in the morning, and Nicholas did not say well done, because well done was a thing you said to a dog, and this was not that. "Tell me why it was worth doing," he said. Harry looked at the flame. He thought about how to say it. He was still slow to speak, and slower when the thing to say mattered, and this mattered. "Because it didn't need me," he said at last. "It was already right, and I kept helping it, and every time I helped it I hurt it, because it didn't need helping, it needed waiting. And the tending isn't doing lots of things. The tending is doing almost nothing, but doing it all day and not stopping. It's the not stopping that's hard, not the doing." He looked up at Nicholas. "The work is slow. You said that. I didn't know what it meant. I thought it meant it takes a long time. But that's not it, is it? It means you have to be slow, on purpose, even when you're bored, especially when you're bored." Nicolas Flamel was quiet for a moment, in the way of a man who has been given something he did not expect. Perenelle had come to the doorway, drawn by the silence, and stood there with a cloth in her hands, and the fire in the far room was a low red gleam, and the lamp on the sill burned even and gold and alive. "Perenelle," Nicholas said without turning, "fetch the boy a book, a blank one, the good paper, the green cover. He has need of it now." And to Harry, gravely, as one man to another, "That is the truest thing anyone has said in this workroom in 100 years, and most of what is said in this workroom is very true indeed. You will want to write it down, that thought, before it thins out and drifts away, because thoughts do that, the best of them, soonest. From tonight you will keep a book. In it you will write what you see and what you think and what you get wrong, especially what you get wrong, because a man learns nothing from what he does right. It will be your book, no one will read it but you unless you choose to show it, and no one will ever take it from you. Do you understand what I am giving you? Harry took the blank green book from Perenelle's hands. It was heavy, and the paper inside was thick and creamy and smelled of nothing yet of all the things he had not written. He held it in both hands as he had held the copper-flowered nail, as he held everything that was truly his, out in the open where anyone could see. Yes, he said. You're giving me a place to keep things. And Nicholas laughed, the real laugh, the one that ran all the lines of his face upward at once, and Perenelle's dark eyes were bright in the firelight, and the lamp burned even on the sill, and somewhere out in the winter dark a ministry man was writing in his little book that there was nothing in the coombe but birds, and he was wrong, and the house did not care, and kept its own time and its own fire, and now, at last, its own boy. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, The Green Language. By the summer he was 7, Harry could read the garden. He did not think of it as a skill, any more than he thought of walking as a skill, because it had come to him slowly, one plant at a time, across 2 years of mornings, and things that arrive slowly never announce themselves. But it was there. He could stand at the top of the walled garden in the early light, before the dew burned off, and know without touching anything which of the beds was thirsty and which was content, which of the roses had a canker starting deep in a cane and which was only sulking after rain, which herbs wanted cutting and which wanted leaving. The plants told him, not in words, in the set of a leaf, the color under a leaf, the way a stem held itself or failed to. Perenelle called it the green language, and she said it was the oldest language there was, older than any that used a mouth, and that most people went their whole lives deaf to it and called that being sensible. None of which is to say he was a solemn child or a small adult, whatever the odd things he knew made him look like from the outside. He was 7, and he climbed the apple trees to their creaking tops and dared himself higher, and he ran the length of the orchard for no reason but the running, and he had invented, across that spring, an elaborate and entirely serious game with Corbo in which Harry hid acorns about the garden and the raven found them, every one, in half the time it had taken to hide them, and then sat on a wall looking insufferably pleased with himself until Harry hid them again. He got bored still, the quick live boredom of a quick live mind, and boredom still made him restless, and restlessness still made him do foolish things, though smaller foolish things now than bursting light bulbs. He sulked when a working went wrong and had to be coaxed out of it with honey. And sometimes, at the top of the walled garden, he watched the far small shapes of the Witchcombe children playing on the green, too distant to have faces, and felt a thing he had no name for and did not mention, a pull under his breastbone there and then gone, folded away and not fed, because he had everything, he told himself everything, and it seemed a poor and greedy thing to want the one shape of ordinary that this extraordinary life could not give him. His green book was nearly full. He was on his third one, in truth. The first 2 sat on the shelf in his room, fat and swollen with pressed leaves and penciled drawings and his small square handwriting getting steadily less small, and he read back through them sometimes and was embarrassed by the boy who had written the early pages, which Nicholas said was the surest sign a person was learning, that his old work made him wince. This third book he kept in a canvas satchel that went everywhere with him, and in it that summer he was making a study of the foxgloves along the north wall, drawing them stalk by stalk, because he had noticed that the bees went to some and not to others, and he wanted to know what the favored ones knew. They are telling you something with those spots, Nicholas said, coming up behind him one morning with his hands full of cut angelica, the freckles in the throat of the bell. Why do you suppose a flower would freckle itself? To be pretty, Harry said, and then, because in this house the first answer was almost never the true one and he had learned to keep going past it, no, not to be pretty. Pretty is for us, the flower doesn't care what we think. The freckles are for the bees. There, he traced one with a fingertip, the little purple thumbprints running down into the dark of the bell, there a path, like the lights on the edge of a road at night. They point the way in to the middle where the honey stuff is, the nectar. The flower wants the bee to go all the way in and get covered in the yellow dust, so it makes a road for it and paints the road so the bee can't miss it. Nicholas set down his angelica and looked at the foxglove and then at the boy, and the low, pleased rumble came up in his chest. A road painted so the traveler cannot miss it, he said. Every alchemist for 3,000 years has been trying to say that sentence, and most of them said it far worse. That is the doctrine of signatures, Harry, which is a grand and dusty name for a simple and living thing, that everything in the world wears its purpose on the outside if you have the eyes to read it. The walnut shaped like a little skull, that strengthens the head. The eyebright with the bright eye in its flower, that clears the sight. The freckled road into the foxglove that says here, be here, this way to the treasure. Nothing hides what it is for, nothing. The world is not a locked box, whatever the miserable people say. The world is a book left open on the table, and the letters are color and shape and smell and the way a stem holds itself, and you, he tapped the green book with one stained finger, are learning to read it faster than any pupil I have had in a very long time. Which is a great gift and which will get you into a great deal of trouble, and we shall come to that. Why trouble? Harry asked. Because you read fast, said Nicholas, and reading fast makes a person believe he can do everything fast, and that is the one thing that is never true. Come. The still is charged and the fire is coming up, and today you are going to help me draw the soul out of a rose, and I am going to watch you try to hurry it, because you will try, everyone does, and the rose is the best teacher of patience there is, being made almost entirely of it. The still room was Harry's favorite room in the house that was not behind the black door. It stood off the kitchen, cool and stone-flagged, and it smelled of 100 summers stacked in bottles, dried lavender and rose and rosemary, orange flower and elder, the sharp green ghost of 1,000 distillations soaked into the very walls. In the middle of it, on a low brick furnace, sat the alembic, a round-bellied glass vessel with a long swan's neck of a spout that curved down and away into a coil, and it was, Nicholas said, the little sister of the great apparatus behind the black door, the same idea in plain clothes. You put the world into the belly of it. You warmed it gently, gently, until the finest and most volatile part of the world thought about becoming air and rose up as a breath, a spirit, and traveled along the swan's neck and cooled in the coil and came down at the far end, drop by patient drop, as a clear water more purely itself than the thing it came from had ever managed to be. The rose is in the belly, Nicholas said. Petals and spring water, nothing else. Now, the fire. This is the whole of the art and the whole of the danger, and it is your hands on it today, not mine. Bring the fire up, slowly. You are not boiling an egg, you are coaxing a shy thing out of its house. Too little heat and nothing comes, and the petals sit and stew and rot and give you stinking brown water good for nothing. Too much heat, and here he stopped and looked at Harry and did not finish the sentence because he wanted the boy to find the end of it himself. Harry brought the fire up. He fed the furnace as he had learned to feed the lamp, 2 years of tending in his hands now, and for a while it went beautifully. The belly of the alembic warmed and clouded, and a bloom of mist climbed its inner curve, and the whole room filled slowly with the smell of roses. Not the smell of roses in a garden, but something more, the idea of roses, the soul of them coming loose from the petals and rising. And Harry watched the first clear drop gather at the mouth of the coil and swell and fall tick into the waiting glass, and it was rose water, and he had made it, and a fierce, bright gladness went through him. And because he was 7, and because he was glad, and because the drops were falling one at a time, tick, tick, and each one took an age, and he could see how many more the belly held and how long it would take at this rate, he thought faster. He thought it as he always thought it. He fed the fire. Harry, Nicholas said, only that. He did not stop him. He never simply stopped Harry, because a lesson stopped before it hurt is a lesson only half learned. The belly of the alembic bloomed cloudy, then rolled, then seethed, and the drops at the coil's mouth came faster, yes, but they came fat and hurried, and they came cloudy, and then the smell of the room changed. The pure high smell of rose soul went muddy and thickened and turned at the back of it, sharp and green and bitter, a smell like a stem crushed, like a thing broken rather than persuaded, and the water dropping now into the glass was no longer clear. It had a tinge to it and a hardness to the smell, and Harry pulled the fire back fast, too late, and stood over the ruined run with his face hot. Nicholas reached past him and drew the flask away and held it to the light. There, he said, not unkindly. Do you smell it, that green bitterness under the rose? That is the smell of hurry. You did not draw the soul of the rose, you tore it. You brought up the fine spirit and the coarse body both at once, all in a rush, mixed, muddled, and now they are married in the flask and cannot be told apart, and the whole run is spoiled, not because you did too little, but because you did too much too fast and could not bear the drops to fall one at a time. He set the ruined flask down. This is your foxglove lesson wearing different clothes. You read fast, and you believe the reading means you can do fast, and the rose has just told you in the only language it has that you cannot. No one can. The soul comes out drop by drop, or it does not come out clean at all, and there is no fire hot enough in all the world to hurry a soul. Men have tried. I have tried in my greedy youth 400 years ago, and I have the burns to prove it, and the wasted years, which are worse than the burns. He handed Harry the cloth to wipe the glass. We will charge it again, and you will bring the fire up again, and this time you will let the drops fall at the speed the rose chooses, and you will be bored, and the boredom will feel unbearable, and you will bear it anyway, because that, not the reading, not the cleverness, not the quick eye, that is the thing I am actually teaching you. Everything else you could learn from a book, bearing the slowness you can only learn from the rose. They charged it again. Harry brought the fire up slow and held it there, and the drops fell one at a time, tick, 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 and he was bored past bearing, and he bore it, his hands still on the fire and his jaw aching from wanting to rush. And at the end of the long afternoon there was a flask of rose water clear as glass and pure as light, and it smelled of nothing but the very soul of the rose, and Harry, exhausted by the enormous labor of doing almost nothing for hours, understood that he had done something much harder than making it fast. He had let it be slow. The strange thing, the thing he tried to set down in the green book afterward and could not quite catch, was that the slow run had not felt slow at the end. Somewhere in the middle of the boredom, past the part where he could not bear it, there had been a turning, and the waiting had stopped being a thing done to him and become a thing he was doing on purpose with his whole attention, and in that turning the boredom had quietly changed its name to peace. He had not known those two feelings were so near neighbors. He suspected Nicholas had known it all along and had let him find it himself, because a thing found is kept and a thing told is only borrowed. He wrote that in the green book that night in his handwriting that was getting less small. There is no fire hot enough to hurry a soul. He drew a line under it. He did not yet know how much that line would come to cost or save. On the morning of the Witchcombe market, Harry put his hand to the hive at last. He had been 3 summers coming to it. In the first he had not gone near the skeps at all. In the second he had sat among them and watched Perenelle's bare wrinkled hand covered in walking bees and thought he could never do such a thing. And now in the third, without deciding to, he found himself at the mouth of the tallest skep with his hand rising, slow, a hand with all the time in the world and know where it needed to be. The bees came up over his fingers, gold and black and busy, tickling, walking, and did not sting him. He stood in the drowsy roar with 100 bees crossing the back of his hand like travelers over a bridge, and he did not move, and he did not hurry, and the old readiness that had once lived in him at every strange touch did not so much as stir. Perenelle watched from the garden path with her market basket on her arm and said nothing at all, because there is nothing to say to a thing finally done right, and saying it would only spoil it. They walked down to the village together, the two of them, the ancient woman and the 7-year-old, along the lane where the false birdwatcher had once stood, and Witchcombe was a huddle of grey stone and slate at the bottom of the combe, a church and a green and a single shop that sold everything, and to the village Perenelle was Madame Nell, the eccentric old Frenchwoman from the big house up the valley who kept bees and paid in honey and coin, and never gossiped, and could not be gossiped out of a single fact about herself in 30 years of trying. The village was fond of her in the wary way villages are fond of anything they cannot explain. She was fond of the village in the wary way she was fond of most things. Harry loved market day past all reason, because it was the ordinary world, the muggle world, loud and cluttered and smelling of frying and fish and cut grass, and because Perenelle always let him choose one thing at the shop that was purely useless and purely his, and he took the choosing as seriously as he took a distillation, walking the shelves for 20 minutes before settling that day on a twist of barley sugar the color of the elixir. It was in the shop that he first heard the stranger. The man was at the counter when they came in, talking to Mr. Pendley who kept the shop, and he was dressed like a walker, boots and a canvas coat, and he had a pleasant unremarkable face and a pleasant unremarkable voice, and Harry, sucking his barley sugar in the doorway, read him in a single breath and went still, because the man was doing the thing the birdwatcher had done. He was pretending to be idle, and he was not idle, he was fishing. "Handsome old house right up at the head of the valley," the man was saying, easy, friendly, turning a tin of something in his hands and not buying it. "Passed it on my walk. Couple live there, do they, on their own? Only I thought I saw a child up a tree, and I wondered all the way up there, so far from the school and the other little ones. Must be lonely for the family, I thought, so cut off. Grandchildren visiting, is it? Or do they have the raising of a young one themselves, up there, the two of them at their age?" Mr. Pendley, who was slow and kind and had known Madame Nell for 30 years, opened his mouth to answer, because it was a friendly question and he was a friendly man. And Perenelle, who had crossed the shop without seeming to hurry, was there, setting her basket on the counter with a small firm thump that turned every head, saying, "Mr. Pendley, the dark comb this week in the light, and I want a word about the churchyard limes. They are being murdered by whoever is pruning them, and it is a scandal." All in her ordinary tart-carrying voice, filling the shop with herself, leaving no crack in the air for the stranger's question to live in. And to the stranger, turning to him with a bright, blank, terrible courtesy, she said, "Do forgive me, monsieur, I am an old woman, and I have a great deal to do, and very little day left to do it in. Was there something you wanted? Mr. Pendley is run off his feet, as you see." The man smiled and said, "No, nothing, just passing, lovely village," and put down his tin and touched his cap and went out. And through the shop window Harry watched him go up the green, and watched the pleasant unremarkable walk of him, and saw the exact moment when, thinking himself unobserved, the man let the pleasantness fall off his face like a coat, and what was under it was nothing Harry had a word for, only a thinness, a hunger, a grey patient wrongness. There for a heartbeat and then gone as the man rounded the church and was lost to sight. Perenelle did not speak of it in the shop. She did her marketing and complained about the limes and let Harry carry the lighter basket, and only when they were well up the lane and out of every ear did she say, quietly, not stopping, "You saw him for what he was. He wanted to know if there was a boy," Harry said, "up at the house. He wanted to know about me." "Yes." Perenelle's stained hand found the back of his neck and rested there, warm, steadying, and did not tremble, not yet. "He is nobody, that one, a hired pair of eyes. His master would never come himself into a shop that sells fish paste. But he is a sign of weather, little one, the way the coat in the lane was a sign of weather, and the weather is coming on faster than I would like." She looked down at him, and her dark eyes were quick and clear and utterly unafraid, and that more than anything she said was what Harry kept. Eat your barley sugar. You chose it well. It is the color of a thing you will understand better before the summer is out. And say nothing to Nicholas until we are indoors. He worries loudly, and the orchard has ears. Perenelle began to fail at the turn of that summer, and Harry, who read small print, saw it before he was told. It came on the way dusk comes, so gradually that no single moment marked it. She rose later. She who had never in Harry's memory sat down before the last plate was cleared began to sit in the afternoons in the chair by the kitchen window, with her hands still in her lap and her eyes on the middle distance and her knitting untouched beside her. Her stained fingers that had walked among bees and never faltered developed a small tremor when she poured. The color went out of her by degrees, not into pallor exactly but into something grayer and thinner, as though she were a drawing of herself that someone was slowly rubbing out with the side of a hand. Harry watched and said nothing, because saying nothing was still his oldest habit and his surest one. But he began to be underfoot in a way he had never been, finding reasons to be in whatever room she was in, carrying things she had not asked for, and Perenelle, who missed nothing, let him, and did not tell him she was well because she did not tell people lies, and did not tell him she was ill because it was not yet time. One evening she asked him to bring in honey from the still room, and he brought the wrong jar, and she said, "No, little one, the dark comb, the old dark comb from the top shelf," and he went back for it, and when he came in with it she had let her head fall back against the chair and her eyes were closed and her breathing had gone shallow and quick and rough, and she did not answer when he said her name. Harry did not run for Nicholas. He wanted to. His whole body wanted to bolt and shout. But something the house had taught him held him still for one heartbeat, long enough to look, to read, and what he read in the gray, shallow-breathing shape of the woman who had kept the dark for him on his first night was that she was not gone, only very far down, and that a bolting, shouting boy would help her nothing. So he did not bolt. Went fast but not frantic to the workroom door, and he did the thing he had never once done in 2 years, the thing that was the one true rule of the house. He knocked on the black oak door hard 3 times, and he called through it, "Steady, Mr. Flamel, come now, it's Perenelle, come now." The door opened at once. Harry saw the inside of the workroom for the first time that night, and he would remember it forever, though he barely looked at it, because he had no eyes to spare from the thing that was happening. He had a confused impression of red light and enormous heat, and a great domed furnace breathing in the dark like a sleeping animal, the Athanor, the fire that had burned longer than England. Of vessels of glass and clay in shapes he had no names for, of a smell of hot metal and something else beneath it, something clean and terrible and old. But all of that went past him because Nicholas had gone to Perenelle the instant the door opened, moving faster than Harry had known the old man could move, and gathered her gray shape up out of the chair, and Harry saw his face as he did it, and there was no red-lit remoteness in it now and no grandfather in it either, but only a naked and ancient dread, the dread of a man who has had 600 years to learn exactly how much there is to lose. "The elixir," Nicholas said. "Harry." Behind the black door on the middle bench there is a rack of small flasks, ruby-colored, stoppered with wax. "Bring me one, do not run with it, do not drop it, walk fast and hold it in both hands, go." Harry went. He walked fast and held it in both hands, one ruby flask warm through the glass, glowing faintly of its own accord with a light that was the color of the workroom and the color of the little glowing stone by his bed, and the color, he understood without being told, of the thing at the very heart of everything in this house. He brought it back and put it into Nicholas's hand, and Nicholas broke the wax with his thumb and put the flask to Perenelle's gray lips and tilted it, slow, patient even now, even in dread, coaxing the shy soul of it past her teeth drop by drop, and Harry stood and watched and did the hardest thing again, which was to be still, and to trust the drops to fall. Color came back into Perenelle the way the tinge had come into the ruined rose water, but in reverse and cleaner. A thread of it, then a wash, the gray lifting out of her skin and the pink coming up beneath, her rough shallop breathing lengthening and deepening and evening out, her tremoring hands going still, and after a long while her dark, quick eyes opened and found Harry's face first of all the faces in the room, and she said in a voice that was thin but wholly hers, "Well, there you are. And you did not run with the flask. I heard your footsteps in the passage, and they were fast and even both at once, and I thought, ah, he has learned it, the clever thing, he has learned to hurry without hurrying." And she smiled at him, gray and spent and alive, and Harry discovered that he had been holding himself together with both hands, the way you hold a cracked cup, and that he could stop now, and he sat down hard on the stone floor of the workroom and put his face against Perenelle's knee, and she put her thin hand on his black hair, and neither of them said anything, and it was the loudest silence of his life. Later, when she was in her bed and sleeping true, and the ruby flask was empty on the kitchen table between them, Nicholas told Harry the truth, all of it, because he had earned it, and because a boy who has knocked on the black door and walked fast with the elixir in both hands is no longer a boy who can be told half things. "We are very old, Perenelle and I," Nicholas said. "You know that." You do not know how old, and I will not tell you tonight, because the number frightens people, and I do not want you to look at us and see the number instead of us. But we are older than we have any right to be, older than any two people who ever lived, and we are old on purpose by an art, and the art has a price, and the price comes due, and tonight you saw the price come due. He turned the empty ruby flask in the light. There is a thing I made long ago with more patience and more failure and more years than you can yet imagine. It is behind the black door in the deepest and best guarded place in this house, and it is the reason I am not dust, and Perenelle is not dust, and it is called the Philosopher's Stone. From it we make that, he nodded at the empty flask, the elixir of life, which is the only thing standing between the two of us and the great and ordinary dark that comes for everyone. We take it a little and we live, we do not take it and we do not live, it is as simple and as terrible as that. Then why didn't she take it before? Harry said. Why did she wait until she got so? Why did she wait? Nicholas was quiet a moment. Because the stone is not endless, he said. It does not tire, but the elixir it gives must be made, and the making is the great work, and the great work has been going. He seemed to search for how to say it, less well of late. There is a renewal the stone requires, that I have done 100 times across the centuries, and that I know as I know my own hands, and the last renewal did not take cleanly. And the elixir it has yielded since has been thin and short-lived, and Perenelle, who would give her share to me if I let her and does not think I notice her trying, has been going without so that I need not, and tonight she went without a little too long. His scarred hand closed around the flask. I tell you this not to frighten you, though it is frightening, but because you are ours now, whatever the arrangement said, and a person who is ours does not get lied to about the shape of the danger. The renewal must be done and done soon and done right, and when it is, there will be elixir enough and to spare, and this gray evening will be a story we tell. But it must be done right, Harry, and the one thing I cannot do it fast. Harry looked at the empty ruby flask, the color of the stone by his bed drained out of it now clear and cold. The work is slow, he said. The work is slow, said Nicholas, and the price of hurrying it is a gray evening or worse. Now you know why I have spent 2 years teaching a quick boy to bear slowness. It was never only about roses. Harry sat with that. The kitchen was very quiet. Down the passage the black door stood shut on its red light, and up the stair Perenelle slept in breath, true and deep, and on the table between them the empty ruby flask caught the lamplight and held it. He thought about the two of them being dust. He tried to think it and could not make the thought hold its shape, the way you cannot look straight at the sun. It slid away from him each time, too big and too dark, and left only a cold place behind. He had lost a mother and a father he could not remember, and the not remembering had been a mercy he had never questioned. He understood, sitting at the table with the empty flask, that he had gone and got himself a family he would remember on purpose with his eyes open, and that this was the price of it, this cold place, this knowing exactly what there was to lose. I'm glad, he said, which was not what he had meant to say. Nicholas looked at him. That you told me, Harry said. Even though it's the worst thing, I'd rather know the worst thing and be in the family than not know it and be outside. I've been outside, I know what outside is. He turned the flask a quarter turn on the table, as he had seen Nicholas do it 100 times. Inside's better, even when inside hurts. The old man did not answer that in words. He reached across the table and put his scarred hand over the boy's once and left it there a moment, and then he got up to see to the fire, and his back was to Harry longer than the fire needed, and Harry, who read small print, read that too and let him have it and said nothing, which was still in the ways that mattered most his best thing. The renewal would have gone forward quietly, and this story would have been a gentler one if the thing at the boundary had not come that same week. It was Corbeau who found it, and Corbeau who raised the alarm, 3 nights after Perenelle's gray evening, with a cry Harry had never heard from him. Not the low chuckle, not the harsh caw of an ordinary raven annoyed, but a high tearing shriek, over and over, out in the dark at the bottom of the orchard where the land dropped toward the lane. Harry woke to it and was on the stair before he knew he had left his bed, and found Nicholas already there, a lamp in his hand, his face the workroom face, and they went out together into the cold night, the boy in his nightshirt and the ancient man in his dust-colored coat toward the shrieking. Corbeau was on the boundary stone, the old lichened marker where the wards of the house met the wild lane, and he would not come down, and he would not be quiet, and when Nicholas raised the lamp Harry saw why. The hedge along the boundary, that had been green and thick and full of nesting things that afternoon, was dead. Not withered, dead in a way that green things do not go. It had gone gray and then past gray, to a dull soft leaden color, every leaf and stem and the very wood beneath, and when Nicholas reached out and touched a branch it did not snap or bend. It crumbled and fell in a little slither of gray dust, heavy dust, and where it had been there was a smell that was the exact and awful opposite of the smell of the still room. Not the soul of a living thing coaxed out and up, but the soul of a living thing dragged out and down, torn loose and swallowed, and the leaves that were left hung leaden and dead and gave off no smell at all, which was worse. Something had come to the boundary in the night and put its hand on the living hedge and taken the life out of it, all of it, and left the lead behind. Nicholas stood very still and looked at the leaden ruin of the hedge for a long time, and the lamp shook very slightly in his hand, and Harry had never seen Nicholas's hand shake, not with Perenelle Grey in his arms, not ever. "Go inside, Harry," Nicholas said, and his voice was low and even and wrong. "Go inside and bolt the kitchen door and sit with Perenelle and do not come out until I come for you." "What is it?" Harry said. He did not go inside. He looked at the gray-killed hedge and the gray heavy dust, and he thought of the rust roses, of iron blooming into copper because a patient hand asked it to remember what else it might be, and he understood that this was the black underside of that, the same art turned inside out, life dragged into death instead of death coaxed toward life, and it made him colder than the night did. "You know what it is, you know who, I can see it in your face, you said you wouldn't lie to me." Nicholas looked down at him, and something in the old face gave way, and he crouched slowly as he had on the first morning down to the boy's level in the cold, with the killed hedge crumbling behind him. "A man made this," he said. "A man I taught a long time ago when I was younger and more foolish, and believed that anyone who wanted the art badly enough deserved to be shown it. His name is Ambrose Mercer. He was the most gifted pupil I ever had before you, and the most impatient, and the impatience ate the gift, the way it always does, and when I would not give him the last secret, the stone, the renewal, the thing he wanted more than air, he decided to take a shorter road to living forever. This," Nicholas said, and gestured at the leaden hedge, the gray dust, the smell of a soul dragged down, "is the shorter road. He does not make life, he cannot, he was never patient enough to learn how. So he steals it, a hedge, a bird, a person, drinking the years out of living things to buy himself a little more time, and every theft rots him further and buys him less, so that he must steal more, forever, faster and faster, a man running downhill who cannot stop running because stopping is dying." He rose and put his hand on Harry's shoulder and turned him toward the house. "I believed him dead. I have believed him dead for 40 years. The reports were good, and I wanted them to be true, and I let myself be comforted. I was wrong. He is not dead. He is here at my boundary, and he has come, after all this time, for the only thing that can stop his rotting. He has come for the stone." Harry looked back once at the leaden hedge as they walked up through the dark orchard, and then he looked at the house, the warm windows, the room where Perenelle slept and breathed, the black door behind which the renewal waited to be done right and slow, and he made himself a promise that night, silently, fiercely, the way 7-year-olds make promises, absolute and enormous and impossible, that he would not let the gray come into this house. That whatever the man at the boundary was, he would learn enough and be enough to keep the gray out. He told Nicholas the promise later at the kitchen table, because in this house you did not keep true things secret. And Nicholas did not smile at it and did not tell him he was only a child, both of which would have been the ordinary kind thing to do and both of which would have been a kind of lie. "Do not learn faster," Nicholas said instead, holding the boy's eyes. "That is what you're thinking, I can see it. I have thought it myself in front of a killed hedge. Learn faster, be more hurry, so that you are strong enough in time. No, that is his road, Harry, that is the very road that made the thing you saw tonight. If you meet the gray with hurry, the gray wins because hurry is what it is made of. You will help this house, and I believe you will, more than you can dream. But you will help it the slow way, the true way, the way of the rose and the lamp and the fallen drop. Promise me that instead. Promise me you will not try to become his kind of strong in order to fight his kind of strong." And Harry, 7 years old, with the smell of a dragged-down soul still in his nose and the memory of Perenelle Grey in Nicholas's arms still behind his eyes, understood the promise he was being asked for, and understood that it was harder than the first one, and made it anyway. "I promise," he said. "I'll do it slow." He went up before he slept and looked in on Perenelle. She lay with her face turned to the window, and her breathing was long and even and full, the gray gone out of her, her stained hand loose on the coverlet where it had done a lifetime of work. Harry stood in the doorway a while and did not go in. Then he fetched the little glowing stone from his own bedside, the one Nicholas had made him on his first night so the dark would always have a light in it, and he set it on the sill of her door in its dish of water so that its low gold light lay across the threshold, and he thought without words that she had kept the dark for him once when he was small and could not keep it for himself, and that he could at least lend her a light now, though it was a small thing and though she did not know. And though it would not keep out anything that was really coming, it made him feel better anyway. Small, true things did. Outside, the killed hedge crumbled gray into the dark, and Corbo kept watch on the boundary stone until morning, and behind the black door the great furnace breathed, patient, keeping its fire, waiting for the renewal that would have to be done right, and could not be done fast, and now could not be put off much longer either. Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. What the fire remembers. The renewal was set for the dark of the moon in October, when Harry was 8.5, and the whole of that autumn bent toward it the way the orchard bent toward light. Mercer had gone quiet after the killed hedge. A year of quiet and then another, and the quiet was worse than any noise, because Harry had learned by now that the man ran downhill and could not stop, that his hunger only ever sharpened, and that silence from a starving thing did not mean it had wandered off. It meant it was watching and choosing and waiting for the 1 hour when the house would open its own defenses from the inside, which was the terrible arithmetic of the renewal, and which Harry came to understand slowly across that autumn as he understood everything in pieces. To renew the stone, Nicholas told him in the still room, grinding something to powder with a slowness that was itself a kind of teaching, I must first unmake a part of it. That is the heart of the thing and the heart of the danger. The stone is a fixed thing, the most fixed thing in the world, the very definition of a thing that stays. That is why it holds off death, because death is only the great coming apart, and the stone does not come apart. But a fixed thing cannot be renewed while it stays fixed. To renew it, I must persuade a portion of it to become unfixed, to melt, to die and rot and blacken and pass through the whole long turning of the work and be born again brighter. And for the hours that the portion is unfixed, Harry, the stone is not wholly itself, and the great steady note it sounds, the note that has kept the wolves from this door for 600 years, wavers, and the wolves can hear it waver. He tipped the powder into a paper. Mercer above all can hear it. He has been listening for it his whole rotting life. So when I open the work, I open a window, and I must trust the window will be shut again before anything climbs through it. That is why Albus comes. One old man cannot both hold the work and guard the house. It has always taken two. 3, said Harry. Nicholas looked at him. You said it takes 2, Harry said, but there's 3 of us now, 2 to hold the work and guard the house, and me. And you, Nicholas agreed after a moment and did not smile, and did not tell him he was only a child, and Harry understood that he had been given something, and did not yet know how much. Dumbledore arrived 3 days before the dark of the moon, up the lane on foot in the grey afternoon, and this time he did not come only as a friend and a guard. He came, Harry saw at once, also as a man with a question he had carried a long way and meant to have answered, and the question, it turned out, was Harry. They walked in the orchard, the 2 of them at Dumbledore's asking, while Perenelle put the kettle on and Nicholas made his last preparations behind the black door. The apples were down and the grass was wet, and Corbo followed them from tree to tree, hopping the branches overhead, keeping station on the boy, which Dumbledore noticed and remarked on. The raven guards you, he said. That is Nicholas's oldest friend in the world, that bird older than most nations, and it has attached itself to you. Birds of that kind do not give their loyalty lightly or twice. It tells me something about you that you may not know about yourself. He walked with his hands behind his back under his plum cloak, unhurried, his pale eyes going over the boy the way they went over everything, kind and bright and weighing. May I ask you a thing, Harry, and will you answer it honestly, even if the honest answer is one you think I would rather not hear? I find honest answers more useful than pleasing ones, and I have had a very great deal of the pleasing kind in my life. I don't lie in this house, Harry said. Perenelle started it, caught. So I see, then here is my question. Dumbledore stopped by the oldest apple tree and turned to face him, and the weighing in his eyes went very quiet and very deep. You are being raised by a man who has lived 600 years, and who lives them by an art that could, in the wrong hands, unmake the world, or at least unmake death, which comes to nearly the same disaster. One day that art and the thing that art guards may fall to you. So I would like to know, while you are still small enough to answer without cleverness getting in the way, what do you want it for, the art, when you are grown and it is yours? What is it you mean to do with the power to turn lead into gold and to hold off dying? Take your time. There is no wrong answer, only a true one and a false one, and I will know the difference. Harry took his time. He had learned to in this house. He looked at the down apples going soft in the wet grass, and at the raven overhead, and he thought about the rust roses, and the rose water that had to come drop by drop, and the killed grey hedge, and Perenelle grey in Nicholas's arms, and the empty ruby flask catching the lamplight, and he tried to find the true answer under all the answers that would have sounded good. I don't think I want it for anything, he said at last, slowly, feeling his way. That sounds wrong, he frowned. Mr. Mercer wants it for something. He wants to not die, that's a for. And Mr. Flamel says wanting it for is what rots you, because then the stone isn't the thing you love, it's just the door to the thing you love, and you'll do anything to get through the door, even bad things, even grey things. But Mr. Flamel doesn't want it for, he just loves the work. He loves watching the water think about becoming air. He'd do it if it made nothing, if it saved nobody, just to see. The living forever is an accident that came out of loving the work, it's not why he does it. Harry looked up. So I think if you asked me what I want the art for and I gave you a good answer, for then you know I was going to go wrong someday. The true answer is I don't want it for anything. I just want to know how the world's put together underneath. That's not a for, that's only wanting to see. The orchard was very quiet. Somewhere the kettle began distantly to sing. Dumbledore looked at the 8-year-old for a long moment, and something happened in his face that Harry could not name. A settling, a letting go of a weight the old man had been carrying up the lane, and when he spoke his voice had changed, gone lower and simpler, stripped of its lightness. That, said Albus Dumbledore, is the only right answer to that question, and I have asked it of a great many powerful people across a long life, and almost none of them could give it, and the ones who could not are the reason I ask. He was silent a moment. There is a school, you will have been told, When you are 11, a letter will come, and I hope very much that you will use it and come to me and let me finish the small part of your education that Nicholas cannot give you, which is the part about other people. But I am no longer worried about what you will do with what he gives you. I came up that lane worried, Harry. I am walking back down it easy. Do you know how rare it is to make an old man's worry lighter? Are you scared of him? Harry asked. It came out of him blunt and sudden, a child's question cutting clean across the grand and careful thing Dumbledore had just said, and he did not soften it, because softening things was not a habit this house had let him keep. Mr. Mercer, you and Mr. Flamel both go quiet in the same way when his name comes up, and you're the two strongest people I've ever heard of, and you still go quiet. So, are you scared of him too, or is it just me? Dumbledore looked at him and did not laugh and did not tell him not to worry, both of which would have been the ordinary kindness and both of which would have been a lie. Yes, he said simply. I am, not of what he can do to me. I am too old and too well defended to fear that much. I am afraid of what he is, which is a thing I understand too well for comfort. A clever man who wanted something reasonable to live, and let the wanting hollow him out until there was nothing left but the want. I have wanted things that badly, Harry, long ago, and it very nearly hollowed me out too, and so when I look at Ambrose Mercer, I am not only looking at an enemy. I am looking at a road I did not take, and the not taking of it was the nearest thing, and men who have nearly walked a road are right to be afraid of the people still walking it. Fear like that is not weakness, it is memory. Keep yours when it comes. Now, and the lightness came back into him, gentle, deliberate. The kettle wants us, and your guardian will scold us both if the tea goes stewed, and a stewed tea in this house, I am given to understand, is a sin against the whole of alchemy. The last evening before the dark of the moon, the house made itself ready the way a house makes ready for a birth, or a death, or the sort of night that is a little of both. Perenelle scrubbed the great kitchen table, though it was already clean, and set bread to prove though no one would eat it till dawn, and did a dozen small, ordinary tasks with her stained hands slow and certain, and Harry understood that the tasks were not really for the bread. They were for her. A person who has waited 600 years through 100 of these nights learns to fill the last hours with small sure things, so that the hands stay steady and the mind stays here and not out at the wall with the wolves. He helped her, he shelled a bowl of walnuts they did not need and swept a floor that was not dirty, and it steadied him too, and he saw that she had known it would and that the walnuts had been for him all along. Nicholas came up from the workroom near 11 with the smell of the Athanor on him and a stillness in him that was new, the stillness of a man walking a narrow beam over a great drop, all his lightness folded away and put by for later. He ate nothing. He drank a little water. He sat at the scrubbed table and turned his ring on his finger, the old worn ring with the worn green stone, round, and when Harry asked him if he was afraid, because in this house you ask the true question, Nicholas did not pretend. Every time, he said, 100 times, and afraid every one. The day I do this and am not afraid is the day I have forgotten what it is, and a man who has forgotten what the great work is has no business laying hands on it. Fear is only respect that has come close enough to touch. I want you afraid tonight too, Harry, a little, the clean kind, the kind that keeps the hands honest, not the other kind, the kind that freezes. Do you know the difference yet? The clean kind makes you slow and careful, Harry said. The other kind makes you hurry. You know the difference. Nicholas stopped turning the ring. He looked at the boy across the table in the low lamplight, the walnut shells between them, the bread proving under its cloth, the black door waiting down the passage with its patient red line beneath it. Then you are ready, or as ready as a person ever is, which is not very, which is all right. Go and let Perenelle put you in clean clothes. One goes to the great work clean, always. It is the oldest courtesy there is, older than the work itself. And Harry, the boy stopped in the doorway. Whatever you see tonight in the glass, and you will see things men have gone mad trying to see, and things men have gone mad having seen. Remember that it is only matter remembering. It is only the world showing you its insides the way the broken cup did on your first morning. There is nothing in that egg to fear and everything in it to love. Go on. The work began at moonless midnight, and Harry was allowed to be there, and nothing in his life before or long after was quite like it. They went down into the workroom, the true workroom, the one behind the black oak door, and this time Harry had eyes to look, and what he saw he had no ready words for and reached, in his green book afterward, for the biggest words he had. The room was larger than it had any right to be, larger than the house that held it, vaulted in stone gone black with centuries of fire, and at its center stood the Athanor, the furnace that keeps its own fire, a great domed tower of brick and iron taller than Nicola's, breathing its low red breath, older than England, never once in all its ages let to die. And set into the breast of the Athanor, cradled in its warmth, was the vessel of the work, a globe of glass, perfectly clear and perfectly sealed, round as a held breath, that Nicholas called the philosophical egg, and within the egg lay the matter of the work, dark and dull and formless, the prima materia, the first matter, the nothing in particular out of which, by patience and fire and love and time, the everything would be coaxed. Everything begins as this, Nicholas said low in the red dark, laying his scarred hands on the warm flank of the Athanor. Formless, dull, a thing of no promise that a fool would sweep into the bin. The whole art is the faith that the dull, formless thing contains, folded up inside it, sleeping every brightness there is, and that fire and patience can wake it. Watch, Harry, tend the fire as I tell you, and watch what the fire remembers. You will not see this again for a long time. Perhaps, and he did not finish, because perhaps carried too much, watch it now. So Harry watched and tended and learned the fire of the great work as he had learned the fire of the lamp and the fire of the still, by the same slow attention, wearing new and enormous clothes. This fire did not blaze, that was the first surprise. He had imagined the making of the stone as a thing of roaring flame and flying sparks, and it was almost the opposite. A low, deep, patient, unwavering heat, the Athanor breathing its red breath so evenly that its rhythm became Harry's own without his noticing, so that he fed the coals on the out-breath and rested on the in, the boy and the ancient furnace breathing together in the dark. Nicholas asked him for the heat by color, always by color, the dull red of a dying ember, then the cherry of a live one, then, as the hours turned, the deep steady orange he wanted for the going down. And Harry gave him each color and held it, and found that holding a color steady for an hour was the whole of the labor and the whole of the art, and that his 3 years of near nothing had been 3 years of learning precisely this. Dumbledore had gone up and out into the night to walk the boundary of the waking house and hold its edges while its heart lay open. And Perenelle sat in a great chair by the wall, wrapped in her jammered shawl, grey again at the edges, spending the last of her failing elixir to be present at the making of the next, because she had witnessed every renewal for 600 years and would not miss this one though it cost her. And Nicholas stood at the Athanor with his hands on the fire. And Harry knelt at the fire-mouth with the bellows and the small iron rake and the whole of his 2 years of tending in his hands, and the great work began. It began with the blackening. Nicholas brought the fire up slow, so slow, and Harry fed it slow to match, and the matter in the sealed egg warming did not brighten, it darkened. It went from dull gray to deeper gray to a black that was blacker than the black of the room, a black that drank the red firelight and gave nothing back, and it moved, sluggish, turning, seething in slow motion within the glass, and it threw up on the inner curve of the egg a bloom of black dew, a sweating, rotting, dying dark, and the smell that came through the very glass into the room was the smell of the grave, of leaf mold and deep earth and things going back to what they came from, and Harry, tending the fire, understood that he was watching the matter die. The Negrito, Nicholas said, and his voice had changed, dropped into the cadence of a man saying words worn smooth by 1,000 years of mouths. The blackening, the raven's head. Do not fear it, Harry, though every part of you will want to. This is the death that must come before the life, the rot that feeds the flower, the going down that every going up is bought with. Nothing is ever born bright, everything is born out of its own darkness. The fool sees the blackening and thinks the work has failed and putrefied and been lost. The master knows the blackening is the work succeeding, is the first true sign that the matter has let go of what it was and become willing at last to be changed. Keep the fire even. Whatever you see, keep the fire even. The death is the most delicate part and the most easily spoiled, and if the fire wavers now, the matter dies without being reborn and dies for nothing, which is the only death there is to truly fear. And it was as the blackening deepened, as the raven's head swelled dark and rotting and beautiful and terrible in the sealed glass, that Harry's scar woke. It came as it had come once before on the winter evening under Dumbledore's wandlight, a cold deep ache with a pulse in it, but stronger now, much stronger. A cold hand laid flat against the inside of his skull, and Harry, kneeling at the fire, felt the black rotting dark in the egg and the black rotting cold in his own brow reach toward each other, recognize each other, the way like calls to like across a room. And he understood in a wordless lurch of his whole body that the thing lodged in his scar and the thing Mercer did to Hedges were cousins, were the same family of dark, the going down that never comes back up, the death that keeps the death and gives nothing to the flower. He made a sound, his hand came off the bellows toward his brow. Harry, Perenelle's voice from the wall, thin but iron, the fire, do not let it go, I see the mark has waked, I have watched for it, listen to me. The cold in your head is only cold, it has no legs and cannot follow you out. You taught yourself that at 5 years old in a dark I was not yet there to keep. You are stronger than it. You are warm and it is cold and warmth wins. Warmth always wins in the end. That is the entire secret of the great work and of everything else. Put your hand back on the bellows. Feed the fire. The fire is warm. Be on the side of the fire. And Harry put his hand back on the bellows and fed the fire, even, slow, warm, and kept it, through the whole long, delicate dying of the matter, with the cold hand pressing on the inside of his skull the entire time, and did not let it waver, and it was the hardest tending he had ever done, and it was the truest. And later he would understand that this exact hour, kneeling at a fire he would not let go while the dark pressed on his mind, was the night he became, in fact and not in name, an alchemist. Corbo screamed at the turning of the tide. The work had reached its deepest point, the black at its blackest, the pause at the very bottom of the going down where the matter hangs between rotting into nothing and beginning to climb, the most vulnerable instant of the whole night, the instant when the stone's great steady note wavered lowest and thinnest and could be heard, if you were listening, all the way to the edge of the world. And it was in that instant, precisely and not by chance, that the raven's tearing shriek came down through the stone from the orchard above, and the red light of the workroom shuddered, and Perenelle rose out of her chair gray and swaying with her wand suddenly in her hand, and Harry knew with the flat certainty of a thing long dreaded finally arriving that the wolves had heard the note waver and had come to the window. "They are at the north wards," Perenelle said, reading the shudder in the light as she read all things. "Not Mercer himself, he sends his hands first, always the coward, he will not spend himself until the door is already open. 3 of them, 4, testing, pushing. Albus is there, I feel him answer, but the wards are thin tonight, Nicholas. They are thin because you have them open for the work, and thin wards and pushing hands. I cannot leave the egg." Nicholas did not turn from the Athanor. His hands were on the fire and his eyes were on the matter at the bottom of its dying, and his voice was flat and terrible with the effort of the 2 things at war in him. "You know I cannot, the matter is at the pause. If I take my hands from the fire now, if the heat drops a single degree in this next quarter hour, the death becomes only death, the stone is not renewed, and we have opened the house for nothing and lose everything at once, the work, the elixir, our lives, all of it. I cannot leave it. Not for 4 hands at the wall, not for 400. Then I will go to Albus," said Perenelle, and took a step toward the stair and swayed and caught the wall, gray, spent, the failing elixir not enough in her to cross the room, let alone hold a wall against Mercer's hands. She stood there gripping the stone, furious at her own body, and Harry saw the whole shape of the trap close. Nicholas bound to the fire, Perenelle too weak to fight, Dumbledore alone at a thinned wall against pushing hands, and the note wavering, calling the wolves in. And Harry, kneeling at the fire, understood what he was for. "Stay with the egg," he said to Nicholas, and his own voice sounded strange to him, steady, older than 8. "You can't leave it, and she can't cross the room. But the fire doesn't need you. The fire needs tending, even slow, and I can tend a fire. I've been tending fires for 3 years. You taught me for 3 years. That's what the 3 years was for." He was already moving, taking the small iron rake, setting it where he could reach it, settling his knees at the fire mouth. "Tell me the heat you need, and I'll hold it. You go help Perenelle to the stair, and you both hold the wards with Mr. Dumbledore, and I'll hold the fire, and I won't let it waver, I promise I won't let it waver, I'll do it slow." For one instant Nicolas Flamel looked at the boy at the fire, and the whole 600 years of him were in the look, the weight of every renewal and every loss and every pupil who had failed the fire, and the calculation of what it meant to put the most delicate hour of the great work into the hands of an 8-year-old child while the wolves pushed at the wall. And then he saw, because he had taught the boy himself and knew exactly what his hands could do, that it was not a mad thing. It was the only thing, and that he had, without ever quite planning to, spent 3 years making a person who could do precisely this. "The color of a robin's egg at the mouth of the coil," Nicholas said, fast, low, the sharp voice, the teaching voice, kneeling for 1 second to fix Harry's hand on the bellows at the exact angle. "No hotter, no cooler. When the black at the bottom of the egg shows its first thread of white, and it will soon, it is close, you hold the heat exactly there, and you do not change it by a breath, whatever you hear above you, whatever screams, whatever falls. The white thread is the matter beginning to climb. If you hold the fire even through the climb, the work is saved, and we are all saved with it. If you let it waver, nothing I or Albus do at the wall will matter. It is all here. It is all in your hands. Do you understand what I am trusting you with?" "The whole thing," Harry said. "You're trusting me with the whole thing." "The whole thing." Nicholas stood and gathered Grey Perenelle against his side and took her weight and turned for the stair, and at the foot of it he looked back once at the small figure kneeling at the great fire in the red dark, alone with the dying end climbing matter and the cold in his own brow and the screaming coming down through the stone. "Be on the side of the fire, Harry," he said. "The fire is warm, warmth wins." And then he was gone up the stair with Perenelle, and Harry was alone with the work, and the house shook, and he tended the fire. He never afterward could say how long it was. It was a quarter of an hour by the clock, and it was an age by every other measure. Above him the wards groaned and the floor shivered, and once there was a concussion that brought stone dust sifting down through the red light and set every vessel in the room ringing, and Corbeau shrieked, and a voice he did not know shouted something in the orchard that ended in a scream that was not Corbeau's, and the cold hand pressed and pressed on the inside of his skull, whispering, "Down, down, let it die, let it all go down." And through every second of it Harry knelt at the fire mouth and held the heat at the color of a robin's egg, and did not let it waver by a breath, feeding it before it hungered, sheltering it from the shuddering draughts, tending it as he had tended the little iron lamp on the sill the winter he was 5, doing almost nothing, doing it perfectly for an age on the side of the fire. And at the bottom of the sealed egg, in the deepest black, a single thread of white appeared. The matter climbed, and Harry held the fire, and the great work turned toward light. The white thread became a web, and the web became a wash, and the blackness that had drunk the firelight now began, from within, to shine. It was the albedo, the whitening, the washing, and Harry, holding the heat exactly, watched the rotted dark of the raven's head give way to a rising silver white, a moonlight caught in glass, a whiteness so pure and so alive that it lit the red room silver and lit Harry's face silver and cooled all at once. The cold hand in his skull drove it back because the whiteness was the warmth winning, was the matter remembering that it had been born to climb. And the thing in his scar had no purchase on a thing that was climbing toward the light. He wept a little at the fire without noticing, the way you weep at music, and did not let go and held the heat, and the whitening deepened into a shine like the inside of a shell, and then all at once the work put on its glory. Colors broke across the surface of the shining white, colors out of nowhere, colors with no name, greens that were also golds and blues that were also flame, running and shifting and blooming over the whole globe of the egg in slow rolling waves. A plumage of impossible iridescence, a peacock's tail of light unfurling in the sealed glass, the whole spectrum of the world dancing at once across the silver, and Harry, holding the fire, understood that he was seeing the thing the old symbol books had tried and failed for 1,000 years to draw, the cauda pavonis, the peacock's tail, the sign that the matter had passed through death and washing and now held, folded up inside it, ready, every color there was. He held the fire even. Behind him and above him the house had gone still, the screaming had stopped. He did not know how and could not spare a thought to wonder, because the peacock's tail was fading now, the 10,000 colors drawing in and down and settling, and the shining white was warming, deepening, taking on at its heart a first faint blush of gold. The citrinitas, the yellowing. The dawn of the work, gold spreading through the white like sunrise through mist, richer and deeper by the breath. And Harry held the fire, and the door at the top of the stair opened, and Nicholas came down it fast, and Perenelle behind him with color in her face where none had been. And behind her the tall plum shape of Dumbledore, singed at one sleeve, his half-moon spectacles gone crooked, his pale eyes finding first of all the boy at the fire and the shining thing in the glass, and none of the three of them spoke. Because you do not speak in the last moment of the great work any more than you speak at the last held note of the whole world's music. The gold deepened toward the red. It came slowly, and then not slowly. The citrine gold at the heart of the egg darkened, ripened, ran to amber, and from amber to orange, and from orange at the last all at once to a red like nothing in the world, a red that was blood and wine and fire and the low breath of the Athanor and the color of the little stone by Harry's bed and the color of the empty ruby flask and the color, he understood, of every good thing this house had ever given him. All of it gathered into one impossible burning ruby heart of light that swelled and steadied and settled, fixed, perfect, radiant, and held. The rubedo, the reddening, the work complete. And in the sealed glass, where 3 hours before there had lain a dull formless nothing that a fool would have swept into the bin, there lay now, cradled in the low breath of the fire, glowing with a soft red light that filled the whole vaulted room and every face in it, the renewed and living heart of the Philosopher's Stone. Nicolas Flamel knelt down at the fire beside the 8-year-old who had held it, and did not touch the glass, and did not touch the boy, and only knelt there in the red radiance of the thing he had first made 400 years before and had never once made without weeping. And after a while he said, low, not to Harry and to the whole listening house at once, there, you held the fire through the death and the climb and the tale and the dawn, you held it even. It is the finest first working I have ever seen, and I have seen a great many and taught most of them, and none of the others was 8 years old. He put his scarred hand at last on the boy's black hair. The stone is renewed, Perenelle will not go gray again for 100 years, and you, Harry, kept the fire that did it. Whatever else the world tries to tell you that you are, and it will try to tell you a great many things, you will always be able to answer it. I am the one who held the fire. Now let it cool slowly, we have all the time in the world. They let it cool for an hour, and in that hour the workroom, which had held death and glory, became simply a warm room where tired people sat, and that was its own kind of wonder. Perenelle came and sat on the floor. She, who was 600 years old and had color in her cheeks again for the first time in a year, folded herself down onto the stone flags beside a boy and an ancient man and a battle-torn raven, and she took Harry's hand, the one that had held the bellows, and turned it over in her own and looked at the small red wheels the iron had left across his palm, and she did not fuss over them, and she did not weep over them. She kissed them once, the whole burnt palm, plainly, the way you kiss a thing that has done well, and folded his fingers back over the kiss and said, you held the fire that keeps me alive. There is no thank you in any language I have ever learned that is the right size for that, and I have learned a great many, so I will not insult it with a small one. I will only say that I have witnessed every renewal for 600 years, and I have never once in all of them been prouder to be in the room. Now. She got to her feet brisk, the old briskness restored. There is bread proving upstairs, and it is nearly ready, and the 4 of us are going to eat it hot with honey the moment it comes out of the oven, because that is what you do after a birth, you feed everyone. It is the oldest law there is, older than the work. And so at 4 in the morning, with the renewed stone glowing soft and red and cooling in its cradle below, They sat around the scrubbed kitchen table, the two most ancient people in the world, a singed and weary headmaster who had held a wall alone, a raven on the back of a chair, and an 8-year-old with burnt hands and salt dried on his face, and they ate hot bread and honey, and it tasted of the whole summer at once. Clover and lime blossom and the hot-walled garden and the labor of 10,000 bees, and Harry, so tired he could barely lift the bread, so tired the room swam gold at its edges, understood that he was inside a thing that most people never even glimpsed the door of, that he was warm and fed and needed, and kept in the small hours after the hardest and most beautiful night of his life, and that this, not the glory in the glass, this, the bread and the honey and the 4 tired faces in the lamplight, was the thing the whole art was actually for. It was Dumbledore later in the grey dawn who told them what the wolves had been. 3 of them, hired hands, dark wands, come over the north wall in the moonless dark to push at the thinned wards while the note wavered, but only to push, only to test, only to measure how the house answered and how fast and with what. They did not come to break in, Dumbledore said, cleaning his crooked spectacles on his singed sleeve, weary in a way Harry had not seen him. 3 men do not break the house of Nicolas Flamel. They came to make us spend ourselves, to see the shape of our defense with our heart laid open, to count us. His pale eyes moved to Harry. And to count us they must have known the hour of the working, which is a thing 4 people in the world knew, and 3 of them are in this room. So he has an eye inside somewhere, or an ear, or a long patient thread of magic we have not yet found. Mercer did not come tonight because tonight was never meant to be the night. Tonight he was reading the map. He knows now how the house answers. He knows now, and here the old man looked at Harry a long moment, that there is a child in it who can hold the great fire alone through a siege. That is not a small thing to have taught him about us. He will not have expected it. It may buy us time. A careful man rereads his map when a piece on it turns out to be a queen and not a pawn. Or it may only sharpen his hunger, for Mercer above all men understands what a thing is worth by how well it is guarded. He rose and set his hand for a moment on Harry's shoulder, light the way Nicholas did. You did a great and dangerous thing tonight, and you did it perfectly, and I am prouder of you than I have any right to be, having done so little of your raising. But here an old man who has watched too many gifted children carry too much too young. It should not have had to be you. That it was you is a wonder, that it had to be you is a wrong. Remember both halves of that. Do not let anyone, not even the people who love you, teach you to be only proud of the fire and never angry that they needed you to hold it. Harry did not fully understand that at 8, though he wrote it in the Green Book, all of it, as he wrote everything he did not yet understand to grow into. He understood the fire. He understood that he had knelt at the death and the climb and the glory and not let go, and that the 2 ancient people who were his family would not go gray now for 100 years. And that somewhere out beyond the healed wards a starving man was rereading a map with Harry newly drawn on it, no longer a pawn. He understood, kneeling in the cooling red light beside the renewed stone with Nicholas's hand on his hair and Perenelle's color restored and Corbeau, ragged and triumphant, come down the stair to sit on the warm flank of the Athanor and preen his battle-torn feathers. He understood that his childhood promise had been true after all. He had helped keep the gray out of the house, not with power, not with hurry, with 3 years of learning to hold still, spent all at once on the side of the fire. He was the one who held the fire, whatever else the world tried to tell him he was. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5, ere at 9, Harry could make the rust roses himself. He did it for the first time on a wet March morning in the still room, alone, without meaning to prove anything, only following a thread of curiosity down through his own hands as he now followed everything. He had an old iron nail and a phial of the pale blue-green liquor Nicholas had used on his very first day, and he understood at last, after 4 years of learning, not merely how to do it, but why it happened, the whole quiet reasoning of it. That the iron and the copper were nearer cousins than they looked, that the liquor did not add copper to the iron but coaxed the iron to trade places with the copper already sleeping in the liquor, an exchange, a swap, a courtesy between metals, nothing forced, everything invited. He let the single drop fall. He folded his hands. He waited and did not help, and the branching red gold woke along the cold gray iron and budded and opened into little copper roses. And Harry sat in the stone-flagged room with the rain on the window and looked at the thing he had made and felt the old wordless ache and ease, the one he had first felt at 5, come again, deeper now for being earned. That was the small work, and he had it now wholly. The larger work was coming to him too, that spring, in careful stages. Nicholas had begun letting him attempt real transmutations, true ones under a watching eye, the softening of a proud metal, the fixing of a flighty one, the long persuasion of tin towards silver that could take a patient hand a week of even fire and yield, at the end, a thumbnail's worth of a brighter thing. Harry was good at it. He was frighteningly good at it, Nicholas said once to Perenelle when he thought Harry was out of earshot, better at 9 than Mercer had been at 40, and Perenelle had answered him low, yes, and that is exactly why we watch him every hour, because the gift and the flaw were the same root. Harry could see a working 3 steps ahead, could feel where a metal wanted to go before it went there, and the seeing made him want a leap to the end, to skip the patient middle, to reach for the silver before the tin was ready to give it. One April morning he did leap, on a working nearly done, a week of even fire behind it, and pushed the heat that last stubborn hour rather than wait it out, wanting the finish, wanting the bright result in his hand now, and the tin hurried did not brighten to silver. It seized and cracked and threw a spit of molten metal that would have taken his eye if Nicholas's scarred hand had not already somehow been there to turn his head. "Weak," Nicholas said into the ringing quiet, not loudly, holding the boy's face turned away from the ruined crucible. "A week of perfect patience, and you spent it in the last hour because you could see the end and could not bear to wait for it. You feel that has not gone out of you, Harry. I had begun to hope it was going out of you, and it is not. It has only learned to hide, to wait for the 1 hour you're tired or restless or sure of yourself, and then it leaps. It will do that all your life. The quick eye and the quick hand are one thing, and you cannot have the gift without the danger. They are the same metal, so you will not outgrow it. You will only outguard it every hour forever, the way I have, the way," and he stopped and did not say the name, but Harry heard it anyway, the way Mercer, who did not outguard it, went. "Bank the fire. We begin again tomorrow. The tin does not care that you were nearly clever, neither does the world." Harry banked the fire and wrote it in the green book that night, the whole shameful thing, because he wrote the failure's largest. The gift and the flaw are the same root. You do not lose the flaw, you guard it. He did not know, writing it, that he would forget it within the fortnight in a wet April restlessness at a boundary stone. The worst lessons are the ones you have to learn twice, and the second time is always dearer. He was, by every honest measure, a strange child, and he half knew it. Other children his age were at village schools learning their sums in rooms full of other children, and Harry was in a 600-year-old still room teaching iron to remember it had once been copper, and there were days, more of them lately, when he stood at the top of the walled garden and looked down at the far grey roofs of Witchcombe, and wondered what it would be like to be one of the small shapes he sometimes saw playing on the green. Wondered it with a pull under his breastbone that he did not have a name for and did not mention, because Perenelle and Nicholas had given him everything, and it seemed a black ingratitude to want the one thing they could not give, which was other children, ordinary noise, a friend his own size who did not remember the reign of the first Elizabeth. Perenelle knew. Of course she knew. She read him as he read the garden. She did not try to argue him out of the wanting, because she never argued anyone out of a wanting. She only said one evening, brushing rain out of his black hair with her stained fingers, "There is a school, little one, when you are 11. You will go among your own kind and be too much for some of them and exactly enough for a few, and the few are the whole point, the few are always the whole point." This, she gestured at the warm kitchen, the black door, the whole quiet ancient life. This is not meant to be the whole of you. It is meant to be the root of you. A root grows in the dark and the quiet alone, patient for years, so that the tree can stand up one day in the wind and the light and the company of other trees and not be blown down. You are being a root, Harry. It is lonely work. It is the most important work there is, and it ends. I promise you it ends, and the tree comes, and you will be so glad in the wind and the light that you took the time to grow deep first. She kissed the top of his head. "Now, Nicholas wants you. He has a thing to say, and he has been 3 weeks working himself up to say it, turning his ring, driving me to distraction. Go and let him say it before he wears the stone clean off." Nicholas said it in the workroom, which was itself a kind of saying, because Harry was almost never in the workroom, and never without a reason. The stone lay renewed in its cradle in the breast of the Athanor, glowing soft and low and red, and the great furnace breathed, and Nicholas stood by it with his scarred hands folded, and Perenelle came and stood beside him. And Harry understood before a word was spoken that this was a room arranged on purpose, that he had been brought here to be given something, and he stood very still and waited, because waiting was the first thing this house had taught him, and still the truest. "You know what I keep," Nicholas said. "You have seen it made. You held the fire that made it. There is no one alive save Perenelle who knows the stone as you have begun to know it, and you are 9, and I am a foolish old man who has learned, too late as usual, that the heart does what it does regardless of the arrangements one makes with it." He unfolded his hands. In one of them was the ring, the old worn ring with the worn green stone that Harry had watched him turn 1,000 times. "I want to name you my heir, Harry, and I want to be very careful tonight about what those words mean, because they are the most dangerous words in my language, and men have been ruined by hearing them wrong, and I will not have you ruined." He held up the ring, but he did not yet give it. "There is a thing men think heir means," Nicholas said. "They think it means, one day this will be yours, the stone, the gold, the not dying, the power. They think an heir is a person you are giving a treasure to later, and so an heir spends his whole life waiting for a person to die so that a thing can be his, and the waiting rots him, quietly, the way waiting always rots a man, and by the time the treasure comes to him he is no longer fit to hold it. That is what Mercer thought heir meant. I named him nothing, and still he thought it, because it is what the greedy heart hears in the word. I will not name you that. If that is what you hear, give me back the word and we will find another." His pale eyes held the boy's, because that is not what I am offering you. I am not offering you the stone. The stone is not a gift. It is a duty and a weight and a danger, and I would not wish it on a person I loved, and I love you, and so I am not giving it to you. Do you understand? I am not making you the heir of the stone. Then what? Harry said, quiet. The heir of the art. Nicholas's voice changed, went low and warm and certain. The heir of the seeing, the heir of the patience and the slowness and the fallen drop in the fire held even through the death and the climb. The heir of the thing I actually am, under the legend and the stone and the 600 years, which is only this: a man who loves to watch the world show him its insides, and who has learned that love is slow. That I can give you and want to, and it is the only thing worth inheriting, because it is the only thing that cannot be stolen or coveted or used up or turned to gray. A thief can take the stone. No thief in the world can take the seeing. It only ever comes to the patient, and it comes to them free. He stepped forward and took Harry's hand and put the ring into it and closed the boy's fingers over it, warm. This was my Master S and his Master S, back and back, further than the stone, further than my marriage, near as far as the art itself. It is not the stone, and it is worth more than the stone. It says to those few in the world who can read it, this one is of the line, not the line of blood. We have no blood, we are too old for blood. The line of the seeing, wear it when your hand is grown to it. Until then, keep it. You are good at keeping. It is the first thing I ever knew about you. Harry opened his hand and looked at the worn ring with the worn green stone lying in his palm, and he did not put it on, because his hand was a child's hand and the ring was made for a grown one, and he understood that this was the point, that he was being given a thing to grow into, as he had been given the green book, as he had been given the whole of his strange and rooted life. He closed his fingers over it. He looked up at the two ancient people who had, on the worst night of his life, taken in a half-starved stranger's child against all their own hard-learned wisdom, and had spent 4 years making him patiently into a person, and were now telling him in the only language that could not be faked that he was theirs. I don't have a name size thank you either, he said, because Perenelle had taught him that too. So I'll just keep it, and I'll grow my hand to it, and I'll do it slow. And Perenelle laughed wet-eyed, and Nicholas made the low pleased rumble, and Corbo, on the warm flank of the Athanor, chuckled deep in his throat, and the stone glowed soft and red on them all, and it was, Harry would think for the rest of his life, the truest moment of his childhood, the moment he was made on purpose and with open eyes and air of the seeing. That night, alone in the small bedroom under the north eaves, he found a length of waxed cord in his satchel and threaded the ring onto it, the worn green stone of the line, and knotted it, and hung it round his neck under his shirt where it lay against his breastbone, warm from his own warmth, hidden and close in his. He was not old enough to wear it on his hand. He was old enough to keep it near his heart, which was, he thought, the truer place for it anyway, and more like the thing it stood for. He lay in the light of the little glowing stone with his fingers closed round the ring through his shirt, and he did not hoard it the way he had once hoarded bread against a famine. He kept it the other way you keep a promise, out where it could be lived up to. He should have carried the piece of it a long time. He carried it perhaps a fortnight. And then his own worst thing, the thing the whole art had been trying to teach out of him since he was 5, undid the piece of it in a single foolish afternoon. It was April, and Harry was restless, and restlessness in Harry had always been a live and dangerous thing. The house had been kept close all winter and closer that spring. Since the renewal and the wolves at the wall, Nicholas had drawn the boundaries tight and the rules tighter. Harry was not to go past the orchard alone, not down toward the lane, not near the boundary stone, not out of sight of the house, not ever, until the trouble with Mercer was settled one way or another. And Harry, who was 9 and who had just been named heir of the seeing, and who had held the great fire alone through a siege, chafed at being treated like a thing to be locked in a box. And the chafing built in him across the wet shut-in weeks the way heat builds under a still that is being pushed too hard. And on a bright loud April afternoon it boiled over, and he did the thing he had promised not to do, for no better reason than that he was 9 and could not bear one more hour of the box. He went down to the boundary. He told himself it was not really breaking the rule. He told himself he only wanted to see the lane, the ordinary world, the far roofs. He only wanted 5 minutes of not being watched. He would go to the boundary stone and look down at Witchcombe and come straight back, and no one would ever know. He went down through the budding orchard, quick, quiet, the old cupboard quiet, and the closer he came to the boundary, the more the sensible part of him said, turn back, this is the hurry, this is the very hurry, but the restless part was louder, and he was 9, and he did not turn back. The man was sitting on the boundary stone as though he had been waiting there a long time, which he had. Harry stopped 10 feet from him and knew, in one cold plunge of his whole body, exactly who it was, though he had never seen him, because the man was the killed hedge made into a person. He was tall and had once been handsome. You could see the ruin of handsomeness in him the way you could see the rainbow in the broken cup, but the life had gone out of him from the inside, and what was left was gray, gray-skinned and gray-lipped, the skin drawn too tight over the skull in some places and hanging wrong in others, the eyes sunk and pale and hungry, endlessly, patiently hungry, and around him the April grass had gone leaden in a wide circle, killed, sacrificed to buy him the strength to sit and wait. And the smell of him was the still rooms opposite, the smell of a soul dragged down. He was dressed beautifully in dark old-fashioned clothes of good cloth, and his ruined gray hands were folded in his lap with terrible courtesy, and he smiled at Harry with gray lips over teeth too white and said in a voice that was low and cultured and warm and utterly cold, "Nicholas's apprentice, at last, I have wanted to meet you for such a long time." He did not rise, he did not reach. He knew Harry understood later exactly how to be still, how to make stillness itself the trap. "Do you know they have kept you so very close that I began to think you were a rumor, a ward, a trick of the light he had set up to make me waste my hunts, and here you are real and small and out at the boundary all alone, against the rules I am quite sure he set you, which tells me something rather sad about how well those two ancient people understand a growing boy. They forget. They have been old so long they have forgotten that a young thing kept in a box does not stay in the box. I have not forgotten. I remember everything about being kept from what I wanted. It is the only thing I remember clearly after all these years. My name is Ambrose Mercer. He will have told you I am a monster. Sit down. I will tell you I am a man he wronged, and you may decide for yourself which of us is lying, since I am given to understand that you value the truth. He raised you on truth, did he not? Let us have some." Harry did not sit down. Everything Nicholas had ever taught him screamed at him to turn and run up the orchard as fast as his legs would carry him. And everything he was, the fatal curiosity, the wanting to know how the world was put together underneath, even the ugly parts, even this ruined gray part, held him rooted, 10 feet from the killed circle, listening, and Mercer saw it, and his cold smile deepened because he had counted on it. He had counted on it for years. "You want to know how I got like this," Mercer said, soft. "You can't help it. It is written all over you. Good. It is a fair thing to want to know. I will tell you. I wanted to live, boy. That is my whole crime, the entirety of it. I did not want power or gold or dominion. I wanted what he has, what she has, what he is even now giving you in little sips behind that black door. I wanted not to die. I was his pupil, the best he ever had before you. He will not have told you that part, and I loved the work as much as he did. And I gave it 30 years of my one short life, drops falling one at a time. And at the end of the 30 years, I understood that the secret of the stone he would never, ever give me, that he would let me grow old and die at his elbow rather than share the one thing that would save me, because he had decided, he and his wife, that they and they alone in all the world deserved to go on. That is your kind master, boy. He hoards eternity in a box and doles death out to everyone else and calls it patience and calls it the art and calls himself humble while he watches his own students wither. I was to wither. I decided not to. Is that so monstrous? Would you have withered to please him? You who cannot even bear to stay inside a garden wall for one wet spring. And that was the moment Harry's hurry nearly killed him, because the thing Mercer said had a hook in it, a true-sounding hook, and Harry, 9 years old and stung and restless and full of his own new grievance about boxes, felt the hook go in, felt for one single second the seductive give of it. What if it were true? What if Nicholas were a hoarder? What if the boxes were selfishness and not love? And in that 1 second of doubt, of leaning in, of wanting to hear more, Mercer moved, not toward Harry. Toward the boundary stone itself, laying one ruined gray hand flat upon the lichened marker where the wards of the house met the wild, and the gray began to spread from his hand into the stone, into the very edge of the house's protection, the killing gray creeping up the wards themselves. And Harry understood in a rush of ice that the whole conversation had been the trap, that Mercer had never needed to touch Harry at all. That he had needed only to hold the boy still and leaning in, and off his guard for the 60 seconds it took to get his hand on the boundary stone and begin to unmake it from the inside, and that Harry's hurry, his straying, his fatal wanting to know, had walked the enemy's hand right up to the wall. Corbeau screamed above the orchard. Harry did not think. For once in his life, doing the unthought thing was the right thing, because the unthought thing his body did was the thing 4 years of the house had built into his bones. He did not run at Mercer, which would have been hurry, which would have been death. He dropped to his knees at the boundary stone on his own side of it and put both his small hands flat against the gray creeping edge of the wards. And he did the only alchemy he truly owned, the first alchemy, the Rust-Rose alchemy, the coaxing of a thing to remember what else it might be. And he asked the killing gray, with everything Perenelle had taught him about slowness being a kind of safety and warmth being on the side of the fire, he asked it not to fight, only to remember that it had been green. That under the lead was the memory of living, the way under the iron was the memory of copper, and he did not have the strength to turn it. He was 9 and it was Mercer, but he did not need to turn it. He needed only to slow it, to hold it for the length of a held breath, to be for 60 seconds a patient warm hand on a cold thing, buying time the way the whole art bought everything, drop by drop. He held it, the gray slowed under his hands. And that was long enough because Corbeau's scream had done its work, and Nicolas Flamel came down through the orchard not as an old man, but as the thing the legend was actually about, and the April afternoon went white. Harry did not see the whole of what Nicolas did to drive Mercer from the boundary, because Nicolas, arriving, put a hand between the boy and the light was not for a child to watch. He saw only the edges of it. A white so total it had color in it the way the peacock's tail had color, the boundary stone blazing, the killed circle of grass shriveling to ash and then impossibly, greening at its very center where the ash met the wards, and Mercer, the ruined gray man, flung back from the stone with a sound that was not a scream and not a word but the noise of a starving thing denied, up and back and away down the lane in a smear of gray wrongness, gone, leaving behind only the ashed circle, the reeling boy. And the smell of a soul that had been reaching down and had, for today, been stopped. Then it was over, and Nicholas was on his knees in the ash with his scarred hands on Harry's shoulders, and his face was not angry. Harry had braced in the old way, the deepest, oldest way, for anger, for the turn, for the punishment that 4 years had not yet fully taught his body would never come. And it did not come. What was in Nicholas's face was worse than anger and better than it, all at once. It was terror, the naked ancient terror of a man who had very nearly lost the thing he had decided, against all his wisdom, to love. "You came to the boundary," Nicholas said. His voice shook. Harry had never heard it shake, not once, not through the whole renewal. "You promised me the slow way, and you came to the boundary alone because you were restless, because you could not bear the box 1 more hour, and he was waiting, Harry. He has been waiting at that stone for you every single day since he learned you existed, waiting for exactly the hour your patience failed, because he knew it would. He is a man who understands nothing anymore except that patience fails. And it nearly cost us everything. Do you understand? Not you scolding, not you punishment, everything. The stone, the wards, Perenelle, all of it gone, because a 9-year-old could not bear a wet spring." His scarred hands tightened, and then all at once the terror in him broke and became something else, and he pulled the boy hard against his chest and held him there, fierce, shaking in the ash, and said into his black hair, low and ruined, "And you held the wards. You knelt down and you held the wards with the Rustrows working, a 9-year-old against Ambrose Mercer, and you slowed him, you bought the 60 seconds, you did the slow true thing at the exact moment it mattered most. You nearly damned us with your hurry and you nearly saved us with your patience, both in the same 5 minutes, and I do not know whether to weep for the first or the second, and so I am doing both, and you will never, ever, ever go to that boundary again, do you hear me? Never, I cannot survive it, I am too old to survive it, do you hear me, Harry?" "I hear you," Harry said into the old dust-colored coat, shaking too. "I'm sorry, I heard the hook in what he said, about you hoarding. I heard it and I leaned in, and that's when he moved. I knew it was a lie and I leaned in anyway because I was cross about the boxes. That's the hurry, isn't it? Not just running, wanting a thing so much you lean toward a lie because the lie's what you want to hear." He pressed his face harder into the coat. "I won't go to the boundary again, I promise. And this time I understand the promise, I really understand it, I felt how close it was." Nicholas held him a moment longer in the ash and the smell of stopped gray, and then he set the boy back to look at him and wiped Harry's face with his scarred thumb, and said very quietly, the shaking gone out of him now, the terrible calm returned, "Good. Then it was worth it, almost, if you truly understand it now, because that understanding is a thing I could never have taught you with words, and now you have it in your bones where it will keep you alive. But hear the rest of it, Harry, the part that matters more than the scolding. He did not come today for the stone. He could not have taken the stone today, he had not the strength, and he knew it. He came today for you. He has looked at this house for years and he has seen the one crack in it, the one soft place, the one thing Nicolas Flamel loves too much to guard coldly, and it is not the stone. It is you. He will not try the walls again while I stand. He will try the boy. He will use what you want against you because that is the whole of his art now, and you want a great deal. You are 9 and full of wanting, and that is not a flaw in you, it is only your age, but he will make it a wound if we let him." He stood and drew Harry up with him out of the ash. "So the box is not a box anymore, do you see? It is a shield, and you are old enough now after today to be told the difference and to help me hold it instead of chafing against it, will you? Not as a boy kept in, as an heir standing guard. There is a great difference, and it is all in whether you chose it." "I'll choose it," Harry said, and meant it in his bones where it would keep them all alive. Mercer's message came 3 days later, and it came the way everything of Mercer's came, wearing courtesy over hunger. It was a letter, delivered no one ever knew how, lying on the boundary stone at dawn where Corbeau found it, written in a fine old hand gone shaky at the edges the way the man himself had, and Nicholas read it aloud at the kitchen table to Perenelle and Harry, because in this house the shape of the danger was not hidden from anyone who lived in it. "My old master," Nicholas read, and his voice was flat and even, giving the words no more than they were owed. "We are neither of us young, and I am, as you saw, running short of the commodity we both trade in. I will not fence. I am dying faster now than I can steal to slow it, and there is one thing in the world that will stop it, and you have it, and you have had it for 600 years, and I want my share. Not the stone, I know better than to ask for the stone. I know you would break it and die with your wife before you would put it in my hand. I want the elixir, a cup of it. Enough to stop the rot and let me live out a natural span, which is all I ever wanted, which you denied me over a point of pride you have dressed up as virtue for 4 centuries. Give me 1 cup of the elixir of life freely, and I will go, and you will never see me again, and the boy will grow up safe." Refuse me, and I will come for it, and I will not come alone, and I will not come gently, and when I have drained your wards and your wife and you, I will raise the boy myself in my own art, the fast art, and make of your precious heir of the seeing something you would not recognize. You have until the turning of the year. Choose well. You were always so very good at choosing for other people. A.M. The kitchen was quiet. The fire ticked. Outside, the April light lay green and ordinary on the orchard, and it was hard to believe in that light in the warm room that any of it was real, which was, Harry understood exactly the horror of it, that the gray could reach into the green and warm from a boundary stone with a letter in a shaking hand. Will you give it to him? Harry asked. A cup, if it makes him go. If it saves, no, said Nicolas and Perenelle at the same moment, and the two ancient voices came down together like a door closing, not cruel, only certain. It is not that I will not spend a cup of elixir to be rid of him, Nicolas said, more gently, seeing the boy's face. I would pour him a barrel if a barrel would end it. But it will not end it, Harry, and I need you to understand why, because you have a kind heart, and he will use your kind heart as surely as he used your restlessness if you let him, if you start to think refusing him is only pride. Hear the reasoning. Mercer does not have a natural span left to live out. That is a lie he tells so beautifully he may even believe it. He is not a sick man asking for medicine. He is a dead man 4 times over, held together by stolen years, and a cup of elixir would not let him live out a life. It would let him live long enough to come back for the next cup, and the next, because the rot in him is not a disease the elixir cures, it is what he is now, all the way down. Feed a man like that and you have not fed a hungry man, you have taught a monster where the larder is. The only mercy left to Ambrose Mercer, the true one, the one he cannot see and would not take, is the end he has spent his whole life running from. I cannot give it to him. I would if I could, but I cannot even give him that. He folded the letter once. What I can give him is a shut door and a guarded house and a family that stands together and a boy who has learned 3 days ago in the ash exactly what his own wanting can cost. That is what stands between us and the turning of the year. It will have to be enough. We will make it enough. He set the folded letter in the fire, and they watched the fine shaking hand blacken and curl and go, and Harry thought about the negrito, the blackening that comes before the light, and hoped with everything in him that this blackening was that kind, the kind that feeds the flower and not the other, the kind that keeps the death and gives nothing back. Dumbledore came within the week, and this time he did not come up the lane on foot pretending to be an eccentric visitor. He came out of the workroom fire in a rush of green flame, because the time for pretending was over, and he brought with him a gravity Harry had not seen in him before, the gravity of a general and not a grandfather. They held a council at the scrubbed kitchen table, the 4 of them, for Harry was at the table now by right, an heir who had chosen his post, and no one suggested he leave it. Dumbledore read Mercer's letter twice and set it down and folded his long hands and was quiet a while. He gives you until the turning of the year, he said at last, which is a courtesy, and Mercer's courtesies are never gifts, they are always purchases. He buys something with the delay. Time to gather what he means to bring, since he tells you will not come alone. Time to weaken further so that his hunger, when he comes, is at its sharpest and least sane. And time, I think, for the thing he tried at the boundary to keep working in the dark doubt. He has met the boy now. He has put his hook in. He is counting on the months between now and midwinter to let it fester. His pale eyes rested on Harry, kind and grave. It will not fester because you have told us about it plainly, which is the one thing that kills a planted doubt, light and air and a family you tell the truth to. You did exactly right telling, keep doing it. Every ugly whisper he put in you, you say aloud at this table, and we will look at it together, and it will lose its teeth. A secret doubt is a wound that closes over dirt. A spoken one heals clean. Then they spoke of walls, and Harry listened and remembered all of it. Dumbledore would strengthen the outer wards himself, layer on layer, in the weeks he could spare from the school. Perenelle, restored and formidable, would hold the inner ring, the old woman's magic that had kept the house unseen for 600 years. Nicolas would guard the work and the stone. And if it came to a siege, if the walls were breached, there was a last place, the deepest place, the workroom itself, which could be sealed from within and which no force Mercer could bring would open quickly, and behind that seal the stone and the family both would wait out any storm. And Harry, said Nicolas, has a post, and it is not to be a child hidden in a cupboard while the grown people fight, because he is past that. He earned his way past that on the night of the renewal. If it comes to the seal, Harry holds the fire. The Athanor cannot be left, siege or no siege. A great work interrupted is a great disaster added to whatever else is happening, and there is no pair of hands in the world I would sooner trust to hold the fire even through a siege than the pair that already did it once at 8, and did it perfectly. That is your post, Harry. You are the keeper of the fire. Whatever falls, you keep it burning, and while it burns the house has a heart, and while the house has a heart it is not beaten. Harry looked round the table at the 3 ancient and powerful people who had, between them, decided that the safest place to put the heart of the whole defense was in the hands of a 9-year-old, not because they had no better hands, but because they had watched those small hands hold the fire through death and glory and knew exactly what they could do. It was the opposite of the cupboard. It was the whole opposite of everything the first 5 years of his life had told him he was. He was not the burden hidden under the stairs. He was the keeper of the fire, chosen, trusted, needed at the very center of the people he loved. "I'll keep it," he said, "whatever falls." The turning of the year was 8 months off. They had 8 months to become ready, and they spent them, and this story could linger a long while in those 8 months, in the fortifying and the fear and the strange, ordinary sweetness of a family living fully in the shadow of a deadline. The bees put to bed for winter, the orchard stripped, the wards thickening week by week until the very air at the boundary hummed. But the 8 months are not the story. The turning of the year is the story. And it came as the turning of the year always comes, slow and then all at once, like water deciding at last to boil. That night he did not put the ring on because his hand was still a child's hand. But he took it out and held it in the light of the little glowing stone, the worn green stone of the line of the seeing, and he made himself a third promise, quieter than the others and older sounding in his own head than 9, that when the turning of the year came and Mercer came with it, Harry would be standing guard and heir who had chosen it on the side of the fire, and he would do it slow. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. The siege. Mercer came on the longest night of the year, and he came, as he had promised, not alone, and he came first not for the walls but for the water. The longest night came down blue and then black over the coombe, early and complete, the way midwinter dark comes, and the house sat in it with its windows gold and its wards humming, and gave no sign of the fortress it had become across 8 months of quiet labor. Perenelle had made supper as she made supper every night, and set it on the scrubbed table, and would not hear of anyone standing watch through the meal, because she held and said so, that a family under siege that stopped sitting down together to supper had already surrendered the very thing it meant to defend. So they sat, the 3 of them and the raven, on the chairback, and there was bread, and there was the dark comb honey from the summer's best hives, and there was the low ordinary gold of the lamp on the 3 of their faces, and Harry made himself taste all of it, on purpose, deliberately, as he tasted a distillation, because 5 years in this house had taught him that the ordinary sweetness was the thing worth guarding and the thing most easily lost. Nicholas turned his ring and did not eat much. Perenelle ate as though it were any night, which was its own kind of courage. And it was there, in the middle of that supper, with the honey still on his tongue and the lamp gold on the faces he loved, that Harry lifted his cup and drank and stopped. Harry was 10 years and some months old by then, and he had spent 8 months becoming ready, and he learned that night that no amount of becoming ready makes the thing itself anything but terrible. He had imagined the siege 100 times. He had imagined flame and shouting and the black door slamming and his own 2 hands steady on the fire. What he had not imagined, because it was too quiet to imagine, was the way it actually began, with a change in the taste of the water. Perenelle had drawn a jug from the kitchen tap, which ran, like every tap and trough and font in the house, from the spring beneath, and Harry drank and stopped, the cup halfway down, because the water was wrong. It was faint, so faint that a person who had not spent 5 years being taught to read the smallest print of the world would have swallowed it and thought nothing. But Harry read it. Under the cold, clean living taste of the spring, the taste that was the whole undernote of the house, there was a thread of something else, a flat mineral heaviness, a taste with no life in it, the taste, he understood with a plunge of ice, of lead. He put the cup down very carefully and said, in the steady flat voice he had learned to use for true and frightening things, "The water's turning gray, the spring, he's in the spring." The kitchen went still. Nicholas took the jug and drank, and did not need to drink twice. Perenelle was already up, already moving, her wand in her hand. And down beneath the flags of the floor, beneath the warm brick, beneath the whole house, the spring that had risen clean out of the deep rock for longer than the house had stood over it, the spring that fed the wards and the work and the family and gave the house its name, was dying from below, and Mercer's Grey was climbing up through the water toward them, patient from the root. "Clever," Nicholas said low, and there was something almost like respect in it, the cold respect of one master for another's cruelty. "Oh, he is clever, and he has had 8 months to think, and I underestimated the thinking. He cannot break my walls, so he does not try. He goes under them. Everything in this house draws on the spring, Harry. The wards drink it. The Athanor's workings need it. Even Perenelle's old unseeing magic is rooted in it. Poison the source, and you do not have to break anything. You have only to wait while everything starves and falls of its own weight." He set the jug down. His face had gone to the workroom face, the deep-reading remoteness, all the grandfather folded away. "Positions, it has begun, Albus," and even as he said it, the green fire in the workroom hearth flared, and Dumbledore was there, come at the first waver of the wards, his half-moon spectacles catching the light, his wand already up. "The spring, Albus, he is in the spring. He means to starve us out from the root, and he has brought company to keep us busy while it dies." As if the words had opened a door, the night outside filled with the wolves. They came over the boundary in the dark, and Harry, sent to the small stair window to be the eyes of the house while the grown people took their posts, counted them and reported in the flat, steady voice because being the eyes was his first task and he would do it right. Not 3 this time, 9. 9 dark shapes coming up through the stripped winter orchard, wands lit low and blue, moving with the ugly patient coordination of things that were not entirely their own masters anymore. And Harry understood, watching them, that Mercer had drained them at least a little each of them, bound them to himself with threads of stolen life, so that they came on without fear and without much sense either. 9 hired wands emptied halfway out and pointed at the house. Behind and above them on the boundary stone sat Mercer and did not come on at all. He sat with his ruined gray hands folded and his sunken hungry eyes on the house, and he was not fighting. He was feeding, drawing the life out of the dying spring as it rose, drinking the very poison he had made, growing, Harry saw with horror, stronger by the minute, taller in his seat, the gray skin filling out over the skull, while the water in the house grew flatter and deader and the wards, drinking lead now instead of spring, began one by one to thin. 9 at the walls and himself at the stone drinking the spring, Harry reported down the stair. He's getting stronger. The more the spring dies, the stronger he gets. He's not attacking the house. He's letting the house feed him through the water while his men keep us busy. Then the men do not matter, came Dumbledore's voice calm from the dark of the passage, and there was a sound in it Harry had never heard, the sound of the old man setting down his gentleness for the night and picking up the other thing, the thing that had once made a dark wizard fear him across a continent. 9 emptied wands are noise, Nicholas. I will keep the noise off you. Hold the spring. Everything is the spring. And then the night came apart into light and sound, and Harry at the window saw Albus Dumbledore go out alone into the winter orchard against 9 wands, and did not see how one old man could stand against 9 until he saw it, and understood that he had never really known until that moment what Dumbledore was. The orchard turned to a country of light. Harry pressed to the cold glass and watched the old man walk out into the middle of 9 wands with his own held loose at his side, unhurried, and the first blue curses came at him out of the dark and did not reach him, folding away a foot from his shoulders into nothing, into snow, into a scatter of white moths, into the smell of a struck match. And Harry could not always see what Dumbledore did to answer them because the doing was too fast and too quiet, a flick, a turn of the wrist. A word Harry could not hear, and one of the 9 would simply fall, or be lifted off his feet and set down again yards away with his wand gone, or go still and stand blinking in the snow with the stolen thread cut out of him and himself for the first time in hours. It was not like the duels in the books Harry had read. There was no shouting. There was almost no violence in it that a person could point to. There was only an old man being, very calmly and very completely, more than 9 emptied men could overcome, and the awe of it went through Harry cold and clean, and under the awe a colder understanding. That even Dumbledore at the full stretch of 600 years of skill, was buying minutes and not the war, because behind the 9 on the boundary stone, Mercer sat and drank and grew and spent nothing, and you cannot outfight a man who has arranged for the ground itself to feed him while you tire. Harry watched the water taste and the light both, the one in his mouth and the other in his eyes, and reported the truth of them down the stair in his flat, steady voice. That Dumbledore was winning every fight and losing the night, because each ward that thinned made the next easier to thin, and the spring under it all ran grayer by the hour, and the more of it died the taller the gray man on the boundary stone grew. It was not enough. That was the thing no one said, and everyone knew, and Harry read in the set of Nicholas's shoulders as the night wore on. It was not going to be enough because Dumbledore could hold the 9 and Perenelle could shore the inner ring and Nicholas could tend the failing wards. But no one could hold the spring because the spring was already lost, already gray to its root, and every ward in the house was drinking death now and dying slower or faster in its turn. And behind it all Mercer sat on the boundary stone and drank and grew and waited, spending nothing, needing only to outlast a house that was starving from beneath. The first ward fell near midnight. Harry felt it in the water before he heard it in the house, the undernote of the spring guttering like a flame in a draught, and then a section of the outer wall's protection simply went out, gone, and cold poured in through the gap, and one of the emptied wands got past Dumbledore in the confusion and reached the house itself, and there was a concussion in the east rooms that brought plaster down, and Perenelle, who had been holding the inner ring alone with the old unseeing magic that was rooted in the dying spring, staggered in the workroom doorway and put her hand to the frame and did not this time straighten. Harry was at her side before he had decided to move. She was gray, not the deep gray of Mercer, not yet, but gray at the lips and under the eyes, grayed as she had been the summer the elixir ran thin, because her magic drank the spring and the spring was lead now, and holding the inner ring on poisoned water was draining her the way going without elixir had drained her, faster, faster. Harry got his shoulder under her arm as she had once put hers under his on his first night, when he was the small gray one and she was the strong warm one, and the turning round of it, the being able to hold her up now, went through him with a fierceness he had no time to feel. He walked her slow and even to the great chair by the wall, taking her weight, not letting her fall, and she gripped his arm and let herself be walked, which frightened him more than the concussion in the East rooms had, because Perenelle did not let herself be walked anywhere, not in 5 years, not ever. "The ring is failing," she said. Her voice was thin. Her dark eyes were still quick, still hers, still utterly unafraid, and that was the worst of it. "I cannot hold it on dead water, little one." No one could. It was never meant to be held on dead water. The whole art of it is that it is fed from below, freely, forever, and there is no more freely and no more forever. He has seen to that. She gripped his shoulder and used it to keep her feet and let him take her weight, which he had once been too small to do and was not too small to do now. "It is time for the seal. Get Nicolas. The wards will fall, all of them. It is only arithmetic now, and when they fall the seal is the last thing, the deepest thing, the thing that does not drink the spring because it drinks the Athanor. Go, Harry, it is your hour, you know your post." They sealed the workroom at the black turn of the night, the four of them and the Raven, and shut the siege outside and shut themselves in with the stone. The workroom sealed went very quiet, and the quiet was the strangest thing of that whole strange night. Outside the black stone walls the wards were dying and the orchard was scarred, and a gray man sat on the boundary drinking the life of the valley, and in here there was only the low red breath of the Athanor, and the soft endless glow of the stone in its cradle, and the smell of hot metal and old fire that Harry had known since he was 5, the smell of the safest place he had ever had. It did not feel like the last hold of a losing siege. It felt like home, which was worse, because it meant that everything he had was in this one room now, all of it, the two people and the Raven and the red light, and there was nowhere left to fall back to after this. This was the bottom of the going down. This was the black turn where the work is either lost or begins at last to climb. Dumbledore came last, backing down the stair with the orchard burning blue behind him, and he was singed and bleeding from a cut above his eye, and there was a grimness on him, and he said, as the great black door swung to, "6 of the 9 are down and will not rise. The other 3 I have driven off, emptied, useless to him now. But I cannot reach the spring, Nicolas. He has wrapped the boundary stone in a killing field a mile wide, and I cannot cross it without spending everything I have left, and if I spend everything I have left crossing it, I will arrive at the stone with nothing, and he is not the man to face with nothing." He pressed his sleeve to the cut over his eye. "I have kept the noise off you all night. I have no more noise keeping in me. From here it is walls, and the walls are dying, and I am sorry, my old friend. I bought you a night, I cannot buy you a morning. You bought us the night we needed," Nicolas said, and threw the last bolt of the seal, and the black oak door and the stone around it lit briefly with a deep red light, the Athanor's own light, the seal drawing not on the dead spring but on the living fire, the one thing in the house Mercer's poison could not reach from below. The seal drinks the fire, not the water. While the fire burns, the seal holds. And the fire, he turned and looked across the red-lit workroom to where Harry already knelt at the firemouth of the great furnace, the bellows in his hands, his post taken without being told, his face steady. "The fire has a keeper. It has had a keeper since he was 8, Harry. It comes to this. The wards are gone. Perenelle is spent. Albus is spent. I have perhaps one great working left in me tonight, and I must save it for the door, for when he comes, and he will come. Everything now hangs on the seal, and the seal hangs on the fire, and the fire hangs on you. Keep it burning, whatever you hear at that door, whatever you see, for as long as it takes. Keep the fire, and the seal holds, and while the seal holds we are alive. Can you do it?" "I'm the one who holds the fire," Harry said. "I'll keep it, whatever falls." And then the hammering began at the door, and Mercer's voice came through the black oak, and the true siege, the last of it, began. Mercer battered the seal for what remained of the night, and Harry held the fire, and learned what it was to do the slow, small, right thing for hours, while everything in him screamed to do a fast, large, wrong one. The battering was not, at first, a battering of force. That was the horror of it. Mercer knew force would not open Nicolas Flamel's door, and so he did not use much. He used the spring. Harry felt it in the fire before he understood it in his head. The Athanor, which had burned even for 600 years, which had never once so much as flickered in all of Harry's 5 years of knowing it, began, very slightly, to labor. Because the Athanor's deep workings, the ancient circulations that fed its endless fire, drew, at the root, like everything else in the house, on the spring, and the spring was dead, and Mercer, at the boundary stone, having killed the water, was now reaching up through the dead water toward the one fire it fed, to starve the seal from beneath as he had starved the wards. "The fire's getting heavy," Harry said, into the red dark, his hands working the bellows, reading the laboring breath of the great furnace. "It's like the coals are the same, but the fire underneath, the deep one, the one that's really the Athanor, it's having to pull harder for less. He's in the fire now, same as the water, he's starving the fire." Yes, Nicolas was on his knees by grey Perenelle, spending the last of a ruby flask on her drop by drop, and his voice was tight. "He has followed the root from the water into the fire. If the deep fire fails, the seal fails, and I cannot feed the deep fire, Harry. It is fed from the spring, and the spring is his. There is nothing I can do for the deep fire. I am sorry. I have brought you to a post I cannot help you keep." And Harry, kneeling at the fire, felt the whole weight of it come down on his 10-year-old shoulders, the seal and the family and the stone and the morning, all of it hanging on a fire that was being starved from a root he could not reach. And he felt his own worst thing rise up in him, huge, the hurry, the wanting to leap to the end, to do something, anything, big and fast, and now, to break the seal himself and rush the door and fling the bellows at Mercer. To stop being the still small hand at the fire and become, just once, the hero who acts. He felt it rise, and it was the strongest it had ever been, because the stakes were the highest they had ever been, and for one long terrible second, kneeling in the red dark with the fire laboring under his hands, Harry very nearly leapt. He did not leap. He did the thing the whole art had been built into his bones to do. He got slower. In the worst hour, with everything screaming go fast, he went slow, deliberately, on purpose, the hardest slowness of his life, and he stopped trying to save the deep fire, which he could not save, and he did instead the small thing that was actually his to do. He reasoned it out, on his knees, in the dark, mid-siege, the sharp, cold, clear reasoning the house had grown in him alongside the patience. "You can't feed the deep fire because it drinks the spring and the spring's his," Harry said, fast and low, thinking aloud, working it. "Fine, so don't feed the deep fire. The deep fire's the Athanor's own, it's beyond me anyway. But the seal doesn't need the whole Athanor, the seal needs fire, any true fire held even with intent behind it. That's what a keeper is, the intent, the held attention, that's the actual thing you told me. The tending is almost nothing, but it's everything. So the deep fire can fail. I'll build a small one it can't reach, not fed from the spring. Fed from, he was already moving, already reaching for the things around the workroom his 5 years had taught him, fed from what I bring it by hand, coal by coal, the way I fed the lamp when I was 5, the way you can't cheat, the slow way, a hand-fed fire. He can't starve a fire that has no root in the ground. He can't poison a spring I'm not drinking from. I'll be the root, me, my hands. Tell me it works, tell me the seal will take a hand-fed fire with a keeper's intent instead of the deep one." Nicolas Flamel looked across the red dark at the 10-year-old who had, in the worst hour of a losing siege, out-reasoned 600 years, and his ruined face did something Harry had no time to read. "It will take it," Nicolas said. "By every law of the art it will take it, because you are right, the seal wants true fire and a true keeper, and it does not care where the fire is rooted so long as the intent is whole. It has never been done because no one has ever been mad enough or small enough or patient enough to hand-feed a seal fire through a siege by himself, coal by coal, for hours, but it will take it. Build your fire, Harry. Build your small, rootless fire that he cannot reach, and keep it, and be the root yourself. I will hold the door, go," and Harry built his fire. He raked a bed of the Athanor's on eternal coals, the ones already burning, out into a small iron brazier. A double handful, no root in the ground, no thread to the spring, fed only by his own 2 hands and his own whole attention, and he knelt over it and he tended it, coal by coal, breath by breath, as he had tended the little iron lamp on the sill the winter he was 5. And the seal tested, wavered, and found the small, true fire and the whole keeper behind it, and took it and held. Then came the hours, and the hours were the true siege, and no one ever put them in the songs afterward because there was nothing in them to sing. There was only a 10-year-old boy on his knees over a double handful of coals in an iron brazier, in the red dark, feeding it by hand, coal by coal, keeping it even for hour after hour after hour, while the great furnace beside him labored and dimmed as Mercer starved its deep root. And the seal held and held because Harry's small, rootless fire had no root for the grey to climb. It was the lamp on the windowsill again, the winter he was 5, wearing the largest clothes it would ever wear. It was the rose water again, the drops falling one at a time. It was every slow near-nothing the house had ever set him to, all of it spent at once on a single night, with everything in the world hanging on his refusal to hurry. His knees went numb and then past numb. His eyes burned. His arms shook with the small, endless motions of the tending. And the whole time his own worst thing crouched in him and whispered the way it always whispered, do something big. You're wasting yourself on coals while she lies grey and he lies fallen. Get up, act, be the hero." And the whisper was Mercer's whisper and his own whisper braided together until he could not always tell them apart. And he answered both of them the same way, out loud, under his breath, over and over, the words worn smooth now by his own mouth. "The tending is almost nothing, but it's everything. Warmth wins, I'm the one who holds the fire. When the brazier smoked, he trimmed it once at the true moment and not before. When a coal spat and a spark caught the edge of his sleeve, he did not slap at it in a hurry, which would have scattered the fire. He pressed it out slow and even and went back to the tending. And once, near the worst of it, when the deep Athanor guttered so low that the seal thinned and the red light in the room dropped almost to dark, he did the one small, clever alchemy that was truly his to do. He took a pinch of the salt Perenelle kept on the workroom shelf for the fixing of flighty things, the salt that is the body of the world, the part that stays, and he cast it into his small fire with a whole and patient intent, asking it to lend the fire its staying, its refusal to fly away. And the coals steadied and fixed and burned truer, held to their heat by the principle of body, and the seal drank the truer fire and firmed, and Harry knelt back over it and understood, dizzy with exhaustion. That he had just used a thing learned among the bees at 6 years old to hold a door against Ambrose Mercer at 10, and that this was what all the small, slow lessons had always been for. He kept a count after that because the count gave the numb hours edges to hold on to. A coal fed, breathe, breathe, the wick of his attention trimmed, breathe, another coal, and somewhere past the 400th coal he stopped being able to feel his hands and fed the fire by the memory of feeling. And somewhere past the 600th he stopped being able to tell whether his eyes were open or shut and tended the fire by its sound, the small, dry conversation of good coals burning true. Twice the fire nearly beat him. Once a draft found the brazier when the outer wall took a blow and the flame flattened and shrank to a blue crawling thing, and the old panic rose in him, do something fast, and he did not. He cupped his hands round it slow and gave it his own breath, warm, patient, a little at a time, and it came back. And once worse, he felt himself start to drift, the exhaustion pulling him down toward a warm, dark sleep in which the fire would gutter and the seal would fall and none of them would ever wake. And he dragged himself back from the edge of it by saying the names out loud, one after another, Nicolas and Perenelle and Corbeau and even Albus, the whole small map of everything he had, laid down coal by coal into the fire so the fire would have a reason to keep burning, and so would he. That was the vigil. Hours of it, a 10-year-old on his knees in the red dark, feeding a rootless fire by hand and memory and the recitation of the people he loved, and the seal held because he held, and the house had a heart because he was it. Mercer at the door felt the seal refuse to die, and for the first time all night his patience cracked. He tried the hook first before the force because the hook had almost worked once and he was a man who went back to what had almost worked. His voice came through the ruin of the black door, low and cultured and warm again, the coldness dressed up in reason, aimed past Nicolas and past the fallen wards and past everything, aimed at the one soft place he had found in this house 8 months before. "Harry," said Mercer gently through the door, "keeper of the fire, I can hear you tending it. Such a good boy, holding the whole house up on your knees while the old people who put you there lie spent. Do you not see what they have done to you? They are 600 years old and they have made a 10-year-old child the wall between them and me, because they would rather spend you than the stone. 1 cup, Harry, that is all I ever asked. He has a dozen behind that fire, ruby red, racked full, and he will not part with one to save your night, to save her grayness, to save you the terror you are in this moment. Open the fire to me. Not the stone, only a cup of what the stone gives, and I go, and you all live, and you need never hold a fire in the dark again. He taught you the truth, they say. Then here is the truth. You can end this right now with one small choice, and the only thing stopping you is the pride of a dying old man on the floor." And Harry, on his knees at his small hand-fed fire, felt the hook go for him again, felt the true-sounding give of it, the terrible reasonableness, the offered end to the terror. And he did the thing Dumbledore had taught him in the spring, the thing that kills a planted doubt, which is light and air and saying it aloud to the family you tell the truth to. "You're doing it again," Harry said out loud, steady to the door, tending his fire, not looking up. "The hook, you put it in me at the boundary and it nearly worked because I was cross and I wanted to believe them selfish, so I told them. I told them the whole thing, every word you said, and they looked at it with me and it lost its teeth, and I can see it now, plain, lying there on the floor of what you say. You don't want a cup to go away. You told them so yourself in the letter. You'll come back for the next cup and the next forever because the cups don't cure you. The cups are just where the larder is. Mr. Flamel didn't make me the wall because he'd rather spend me than the stone. He made me the keeper because I'm the one who holds the fire and I chose it at the table with all of them, and you weren't there because you don't have a table. You don't have anyone to tell the truth to. That's what you are. That's the whole gray of you." He fed his fire a coal, slow, by hand. "I'm not opening the fire. Go on and break the door if you're going to. I'll still be here. I'll still be keeping it." There was a silence through the door, and in the silence Harry understood that he had done a thing to Mercer that no ward and no white light had done all night. He had refused him with the truth, plainly, a child unafraid of the reasonable voice, and it had cost Mercer the one weapon that cost him nothing to use. And so Mercer, out of clever and out of patience and out of the long attrition that had almost won, reached at last for the thing he had spent his whole ruined life reaching for, which was the shortcut, the force, the fast and violent road. The battering became a battering of force at the last, and it was worse and it was better, worse because it was terrible and better because it meant Mercer had run out of clever. He had spent the night starving them and it had almost worked, and then a 10-year-old had done the one thing his arithmetic had not allowed for, had grown a fire with no root for the poison to climb, and Mercer, dying, desperate, out of time and out of spring, threw away the long patient siege and did the thing he had spent his whole ruined life doing. He reached for a shortcut. Harry heard it through the door, the change in the voice, the cultured coldness burning away into something raw and starving, and he heard worse the sound of the 3 driven-off hirelings being called back, and drained all at once all the way, their half-lives poured out into their master in one violent draught to buy him a surge of borrowed force. 3 men spent like coins against a door, and Harry, tending his small fire, understood that Mercer had just done to 3 living men what he had done to the hedge. And that the surge it bought him was going to be enough to break the seal. "Keep the fire," Nicholas said. He was on his feet at the door, the last ruby flask empty, Perenelle gray and barely conscious against the wall behind him with Corbo standing guard on her shoulder, Dumbledore spent and grim beside her with his wand up and little left to send through it. "Whatever comes through that door, Harry, you keep the fire, you do not leave it, you do not stand up, you do not try to help me. The fire is the whole war. If you leave the fire to save me, the seal dies, and then even if you save me, we have lost everything, and it will have been for nothing. Do you hear me? Your post is the fire, not me. The fire, promise me on the ring." "I promise," Harry said from his knees at the fire, and his voice did not shake though everything in him did. "On the ring, I keep the fire, whatever comes through the door." The seal broke at the gray hour before dawn. It did not shatter. It came apart the way the killed hedge had crumbled, gray and sudden and soft, the black oak door going leaden and falling to heavy dust. And Ambrose Mercer stepped through the ruin of it into the red-lit workroom. And he was terrible now, swollen with 3 men's stolen lives, gray and vast and burning with a hunger that had eaten every other thing in him. And his sunken eyes went round the room, over spent Dumbledore, over grey Perenelle, over the Raven, and found at the center of everything, cradled in the breast of the great furnace, glowing soft and low and endlessly red, the thing he had wanted for 40 years, the Philosopher's Stone. He made a sound when he saw it, a low broken sound that was almost grief, and he started toward it, and Nicolas Flamel stepped into his path. Harry never afterward could tell the whole of what passed between the 2 alchemists in the middle of that room, the master and the ruined pupil, the man who had made the stone and the man who had spent his life dying for want of it. He saw the white light rise again, Nicholas's last great working, spent all at once. He saw the gray rise to meet it. He saw the 2 old forces, the coaxing up and the dragging down, the whole quarrel of the art made flesh, lock and blaze and shudder in the red dark. And he heard Nicholas cry out once, and he saw the white light gutter, because Nicholas was 600 years old and had held a losing siege all night and had 1 working left, and Mercer had just drunk 3 men, and 1 working, however great, is not enough against a man who has thrown away his soul for strength. But Harry saw enough to keep forever. He saw Nicolas Flamel become, for the last time, the thing the legend was actually about, 600 years of the art gathered into 1 old body and spent without stint. The white light rising off him not as fire but as something cleaner than fire, the coaxing up made visible, the whole patient upward yearning of the great work turned at last outward against the man who had spent his life dragging things down. He saw it drive Mercer back a step, and another, the gray man's swollen borrowed strength meeting the white and shuddering under it. And for 1 bright impossible moment Harry thought, on his knees at the fire, that Nicholas alone was going to be enough, that the coaxing up would beat the dragging down the way warmth was supposed to beat cold, the way it beat it in the songs. And then he saw the cost of it in Nicholas's face, the 600 years pouring out all at once with the light, faster than any man could spend and live, and he understood that Nicholas had known from the first that this working would empty him to the dregs, that he had chosen it anyway, spent his whole remaining self in 1 white upward cry to buy the room a chance, and that against a man freshly drunk on 3 stolen lives even a whole spent self was a coin short. The white light went out. Nicolas Flamel fell and did not rise, and lay still in the red light on the stone floor of the room he had kept for 600 years, and behind him, spent past moving, Perenelle made a sound that Harry felt in his own chest like a blow, and Dumbledore raised his wand and found nothing left in it, and Corbo screamed and flung himself at the grey man and was struck from the air. And Ambrose Mercer stepped over the fallen body of his master and crossed the last of the red-lit room. He did not hurry even now, even swollen with 3 stolen lives and 40 years of wanting. He had waited too long to run the last few steps, and he walked them, the grey giant of him, past the fallen white-haired body of the master he had once loved, past the spent headmaster who had no more light to send, past the grey woman sliding down the wall with her raven struck from the air, through the soft red glow of the thing he had crossed a lifetime of ruin to reach, and he put out his ruined grey hand for the Philosopher's Stone. And found in the last 3 feet of it that he could not close the distance, because something small was in the way, something he had discounted all night as a rumor and a ward in a soft place, something that did not move. Between him and the stone, at the fire he had promised on the ring never to leave, knelt Harry Potter, 10 years old, keeper of the fire, alone. He had no wand raised, because he was not that kind of wizard yet and might never be. He had no white light in him, and no 600 years, and no stolen strength. He had a double handful of hand-fed coals, and 5 years of learning to hold still, and a worn green ring too big for his finger folded in his fist, and the one small true thing Ambrose Mercer had never in all his ruin managed to learn. Harry lifted his eyes from the fire to the grey and hungry face bending over him, and did not stand, and did not run, and did not reach for the stone, and that last was the thing that mattered, though neither of them knew it yet. Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. The alchemist's heir Ambrose Mercer looked down at the child kneeling between him and the thing he had wanted for 40 years, and he did the cruelest thing he could have done, which was to laugh softly and not bother to kill him. "Move, boy," he said. "You are not even an obstacle. You are a sentiment. He has spent your whole small life making you into a keeper of fires and a reader of gardens, when he might have made you into something that could stop me, and he did not, because he is a coward who loves the shape of a thing more than the use of it. Move or do not, it is all the same to me. I have not come this far to be delayed by a kind heart on its knees." And he reached past Harry over him, his ruined gray hand vast and swollen with 3 stolen lives, and closed it around the philosopher's stone in its cradle in the breast of the Athanor. The stone rejected him. Harry felt it before he saw it, felt it in the red light and in his own bones and in the fire under his hands. The soft, endless glow of the stone that had warmed every night of his life in this house, gathering itself, hardening, refusing, and then Mercer screamed, a real scream this time, not the noise of a denied appetite but the noise of a burned thing, and snatched his gray hand back. And where the stone had touched his palm, the gray had gone black, blackened and smoking, and the stone sat in its cradle glowing on, untaken, unmoved, serene, a thing that could not be picked up by the hand that reached for it. "You cannot hold it," Harry said. He had not planned to speak. The understanding came up out of him whole, the way understanding came up out of him now, 5 years of the house speaking through a 10-year-old's mouth. "You never could, that's why he never worried about you getting into the room. Getting into the room was never the hard part, he told me. The stone isn't a thing you take, it's a thing you're allowed to hold, and it only allows a hand that doesn't want it for anything. A hand that wants it for to live, to win, to stop dying. The stone burns that hand, because that hand is exactly the hand it was made to keep out. You've spent 40 years trying to reach a thing that will never let you touch it, and you're standing right next to it, and it's still the furthest thing in the world from you, because the wanting is the wall. The wanting was always the wall." Mercer turned his sunken, hungry eyes from his blackened hand to the child, and something moved behind them, slow and terrible, a calculation 40 years in the coming, and Harry understood, a half-second too late, that he had said too much, that he had handed the starving man the one idea that could still save him. "A hand that does not want it," Mercer breathed, his ruined face split into a gray smile. "A hand that holds it as a duty and not a prize." He made one. "The old fool made me the one thing I needed," and said it kneeling right in front of the stone. He straightened, vast, swollen, and the hunger in him was a living thing now, naked, past reason. You can hold it, can't you? The keeper of fires, the reader of gardens, the heir of the seeing, who wants nothing for himself, whose small, clean hands the stone will open to like a flower. Pick it up, boy. Pick up the stone and put it in my hand, or I will start with the gray woman sliding down the wall, and I will drink her dry in front of you while the old man watches from the floor, and then the headmaster, and then I will take you last and raise you in the fast art until you are glad to hand me anything I ask. Pick it up. You have 5 years of his patience in you. Let us see if you have 5 seconds of sense." And Harry, kneeling at his fire, with Perenelle gray against the wall and Nicholas still on the floor and Dumbledore spent and Corbo struck from the air, understood that Mercer was right, that he could pick up the stone, that his was the one hand in the room the stone would open to, and that this was the whole of the trap and the whole of the answer, both folded together, the way the poison and the cure were folded together in every working the house had ever taught him. He thought it through as he thought everything through, fast and cold and clear, the sharp part of him that the house had grown alongside the patient part, and it took him no more than the space of a breath because it had to. If he refused, Mercer would begin on Perenelle, and Harry could not stop him, and in the end the man would break him or drain him and get his pure hand on the stone anyway, by force, through grief. If he fought, he would lose, because a 10-year-old does not outfight a man swollen with 3 lives. But there was a third thing, the thing that was neither refusing nor fighting, the thing that was the whole secret of the art and the whole secret of this house, which was that the wall around the stone was the wanting, and a wall built of wanting could not be climbed, but it could be dissolved from the inside by the one thing that had never once been tried on Ambrose Mercer in the whole of his starved life. Not a closed hand, an open one. Give him the thing freely, and the safeguard that burned the covetous hand would find nothing to burn, and the stone would go into his grasp whole and living and willing, and then his own hunger, the bottomless dragging down that was the only thing left in him, would do to the infinite what it had done to the hedge, and the infinite would answer. It was not a plan a strong person would ever have thought of, because a strong person reaches for strength. It was a plan only a person raised on giving could think of, and Harry had been raised on giving since a blue tin and a warmed bed and an open hand on his first night in the world. He stood up, he left the fire. He broke the promise he had made on the ring, because there are promises that are kept truest by breaking them, and he reached out his small, clean hand and he picked up the philosopher's stone. It did not burn him. It lay in his palm, warm and living and light, lighter than a stone that size had any right to be, the soft red glow of it running up through his fingers and along his arm and into his chest, and it did not burn him, because Harry Potter wanted nothing from it, had never wanted anything from it, had been made across 5 patient years into precisely the hand that could hold the thing without coveting it. He stood in the red-lit workroom with the living heart of the world cupped in his hand, and for one long moment the whole of everything hung on what the 10-year-old would do with it. Mercer's blackened hand came out, grasping, shaking with hunger. "Give it to me, give it to me, give it to me." And Harry, holding the stone, did the slow, true, unthought thing, the thing that was the sum of everything he was, and it was not the thing anyone expected, least of all Mercer, because it was not a refusal. "All right," Harry said. He held it out. He held the Philosopher's Stone out to Ambrose Mercer freely on his open palm, the way Nicholas had once held out a copper-flowered nail across an amber kitchen, the way Perenelle had once laid 2 stained fingers against a frightened child's palm and let him decide, the way this whole house had given him everything it had ever given him, freely, without a hook, without a for an open hand. "You want it," Harry said, and his voice was steady and terribly gentle, the voice of a person who has finally understood the whole shape of a thing. "Nobody in 600 years ever just gave it to you. He wouldn't, he was right not to, but he wouldn't, and you spent your whole life on the other side of a closed hand, and maybe that's the whole of what went wrong with you. So here, I'm not going to fight you for it. I couldn't win, and I don't want to, and wanting to win is just another for, take it. It's the thing you wanted more than anything. Take it and see." And Mercer, who had never in 40 years been given anything, who had built his whole ruined self around the closed hand that would not open to him, stared at the open hand that did, and for one instant something crossed his gray face that might have been the ghost of the pupil he had been, the boy who loved the work, before the hunger ate him. And then the hunger, which was all that was left of him, which was the whole of him now, lunged. And Ambrose Mercer seized the Philosopher's Stone out of the child's open palm with both his ruined, grasping hands, and closed them, and pulled it to his chest and drank. He drank as he had drunk the hedge and the spring and the 3 hired men, the great dragging down draught that had bought him 40 stolen years, and he turned it on the stone, the living stone, the most fixed and whole and endlessly living thing there was, to drink it dry as he had drunk everything, and the stone let him. That was the horror and the mercy of it, folded together. It did not resist him now. He had taken it freely from a hand that gave it freely, and so its safeguard, the burning, the refusing, did not come because there was nothing to refuse. The wall was the wanting, and Harry had wanted nothing, and so the wall was gone, and Mercer had at last, at the very end, got exactly what he wanted, his hands around the living heart of the world, drinking. You cannot drink the sea. The stone was not a hedge, not a spring, not 3 emptied men. It was the fixed and living principle of staying in being itself, 6 centuries of the great work, an ocean of life with no bottom to it, and Ambrose Mercer, made all of coming apart and dragging down, held together by nothing but the frantic tension of his own endless theft, put his hunger against the infinite and tried to swallow it. And the infinite poured into him more life than he had stolen in 40 years, more than he had stolen in his whole existence, all at once, a flood, and there was nothing whole in him to hold it, no vessel, no body, no fixed thing, no salt, nothing that stayed. He had spent all of that centuries ago, traded it away for the fast road, and kept only the hunger and the gray. The living flood of the stone rushed into a thing that had unmade its own capacity to contain anything, and it did to Ambrose Mercer what water does to a house of dust. He came apart, not violently. That was the last mercy, and Harry, who watched it because he made himself watch it, because he had learned in this house that you do not look away from the moment that matters, saw that it was almost gentle. The 3 stolen lives went first, pouring back out of him, unbound, released, 3 faint gray threads rising and thinning and gone. And then the 40 years went, and the 400, all of it, all the stolen time draining back out into the world it had been taken from. And Ambrose Mercer aged in an instant through every year he had cheated, gray to white to dust, the ruined tall shape of him settling, softening, crumbling the way the killed hedge had crumbled, the way the black door had crumbled, down and down into a slow, soft slither of gray dust on the workroom floor. And where the greatest and most impatient pupil Nicolas Flamel had ever taught had stood, there was only a drift of ash, and the Philosopher's Stone lying whole and warm and glowing softly in the middle of it, untaken after all, having given a hungry man precisely as much as he could hold, which was everything, which was nothing, which was the end he had run from his whole life and reached, at the last, by his own 2 grasping hands. It was in that moment, as the gray came apart and the living light of the stone flooded the whole room, that the cold place in Harry's scar woke and screamed and was, all at once, driven back. He felt it as he had at the Negrito, the dark cousin recognizing its kin in the gray, the dragging down calling to the thing lodged in his brow. And then the flood of the stone's living warmth swept through the room and through the boy, warmth on the side of the fire, warmth that always wins in the end, and the cold thing in his scar shrank and quieted and drew down small, not gone, never quite gone, but beaten back into its not to wait, overmatched for one night at least. By more life than it had ever had to stand against, Harry put his hand to his brow, and the scar was quiet, quieter than it had been in years, and he did not understand why, not then, and wrote it in the green book afterward to grow into as he wrote down everything. Warmth wins, even there, even in the scar. warmth wins. Then the room was silent and the longest night was ending, and Harry Potter was 10 years old and standing alone among the ash and the fallen with the living stone glowing at his feet, and the war was over, and now came the part that mattered more than the war. He went to Nicholas first. The old man lay where he had fallen, small now, spent, 600 years poured out of him in a single white cry, and his face in the red light was gray and still and old, older than Harry had ever let himself see it. And for one terrible moment Harry read the stillness as he read all things and could not tell whether it was the stillness of a spent man or the other stillness, the one that keeps and gives nothing back. He knelt. He put his hand on the thin chest. And under his palm, faint and far down, like the spring under the house, like the deep fire under the Athanor, there was a beat. Alive. Spent past moving, emptied to the dregs, but alive, and Harry knew exactly what a spent and emptied thing needed, because he had watched it given and given it himself on a gray evening 3 years before with a ruby flask in both his hands. He took up the stone from the ash, it opened to his hands still, warm, willing, and he set it back in its cradle in the breast of the Athanor where it belonged, because a keeper puts the fire back always. And then he went to the middle bench, to the rack of ruby flasks full and glowing from the great renewal he had helped to make, and he took one, and he did not run with it, and he did not drop it, and he carried it in both hands to the fallen old man and knelt and broke the wax with his thumb and put it to the gray lips and tilted it, slow, patient, coaxing the shy soul of it past the teeth drop by drop, the way Nicholas had once done for Perenelle while a frightened boy watched and learned. The whole of the lesson coming round now in a circle, the keeper of the fire become the keeper of the family, the child who had been carried now doing the carrying. Color came back into Nicolas Flamel the way the red comes into the work at the end of the going up, slow and then sure, the gray lifting, the breath deepening, and his pale eyes opened and found, first of all the things in the world they might have found, the face of the boy bent over him with the ruby flask in both steady hands, and Nicholas looked up at him for a long moment out of 600 years and did not ask what had happened because he could read it. In the ash on the floor and the quiet in the room and the stone glowing hole in its cradle, and the child holding the elixir as he himself had taught those small hands to hold it. You gave it to him, Nicholas said. His voice was a thread. You did not fight him. You gave him the stone freely and let his own wanting do the rest. And you did not covet it yourself, not for an instant, not even to save us, or it would have burned you too. Something moved in the old face, wonder and grief and pride all folded together the way everything true was folded together in this house. I have thought for 400 years about how a hand might undo Ambrose Mercer, and I never once thought of the open hand, because I am the man who kept the fist closed against him, and the keeping of it closed was my whole answer and my whole failure both. It took a child I raised on giving to think of giving, help me up, slowly. We have, and his voice caught, and he let it, because in this house you did not hide the true thing. We have a great deal of ordinary living to do, you and I, and it starts with getting an old fool up off a cold floor. Perenelle came back next from her place against the wall, the gray drinking out of the poisoned inner ring reversed drop by ruby drop in Harry's steady hands, and her dark, quick eyes opened and went straight to Harry, always to Harry first, and she looked at the ash and the stone and the boy and understood the whole of it in a breath, and she did not make a speech, because she never made a speech when a small thing would carry more. She reached up her stained hand and laid it against the boy's cheek once and said, "There you are," as she had said it on the night of the renewal, as she had said it, Harry realized, at every moment that had ever truly mattered between them. There you are, I see you, you are here, you are ours, and Harry, who had held together through the fire and the giving and the coming apart and the reviving with both hands the way you hold a cracked cup, discovered that he could set the cup down now, and he did, and he wept at last. The way you weep when the danger is finally over and not before, and Perenelle held him, and Nicholas's scarred hand was on his hair, and the longest night ended, and grey dawn came up cold and clean over the coombe, and the sun, which after the longest night always comes back, came back. Dumbledore rose from the wall in the first light, grey and singed and alive, and looked at the ash and the stone and the three of them tangled together on the floor, and he did not intrude on it. He gathered up Corbo instead, who was battered and furious and very much alive, and set the raven on the warm flank of the Athanor, and mended what he could mend of the room with the little strength returned to him, and waited, in the gentle way of a man who has watched over other people's endings for a very long time, for the family to be ready to notice him. It was Harry who noticed him first, of course. He always noticed people first. He looked up from the tangle of the three of them on the floor and met the pale, weary eyes across the room, and Dumbledore inclined his head and came slowly and crouched down the way Nicholas crouched, joint by careful joint, to be level with the boy who had held the whole night on his knees. "Do you remember," Dumbledore said, quiet, "what I said to you after the renewal when you were 8 and had held the great fire alone through a lesser night than this one? I told you a thing in 2 halves, and I asked you to keep both halves. I said you had done a great and dangerous thing and done it perfectly, and that I was prouder of you than I had any right to be. That was the first half, and it is still true, more true tonight than it was then, and I will say it again so that you have it twice. I am prouder of you, Harry Potter, than I have any right to be. His voice was low and grave and entirely without its usual lightness. And I said a second half, the harder half, and I told you to hold it alongside the first and never let anyone talk you out of it, not even the people who love you. I said it should not have had to be you, that a child should not have had to hold that fire, that it being you was a wonder and it having to be you was a wrong. He looked round the red-lit room, at the ash, at the stone, at the two ancient people spent on the floor. It has been you again tonight. And it will be you again, I think, more than once before you're done. There is something in the shape of your life, in that scar and the story under it, that keeps setting fires in front of you and handing you the only pair of hands that can hold them. I cannot change that. I have tried to see a way to change it, and I cannot, but I can be for you the one voice that always says the second half. You held the fire, and you should not have had to. Both, always both. Do not grow up to be only proud. Grow up to be proud and angry in the right measures, and you will be a better man than the ones who taught you, and they are very good men. Harry did not fully understand it even now at 10, but he kept it, both halves, as he kept everything, and he was glad in a way he had no words for, that there was a person in the world whose whole job was to say the second half. It was days before they spoke of the things that had to be spoken of, because first there was the house to mend and the spring to grieve. For the spring was dead. Mercer's undoing had not undone that. The gray he had driven up through the deep water had killed the source, the true source, the clean cold spring that had risen out of the rock for longer than the house had stood, and for 3 days the taps ran flat and leaden and the floors went cold and the whole house felt, Harry thought, like a body with a stopped heart still warm but no longer beating, and he grieved it more than he had expected to, because the spring had been the taste of every safe day of his life. It was Harry who brought it back, and it took him the rest of that winter, and it was the truest work he ever did. I can't turn it all at once, he said on the first morning, kneeling at the mouth of the spring in the cold cellar where it rose, his hands flat on the leaden water, reading it as he read all things. It's too big and I'm too small, and turning it all at once would be hurrying, and hurrying what killed it, but it's not gone. Under the lead there's the memory of the spring, the way under the iron there's the memory of copper. It remembers being alive. I can't make it be alive, but I can ask it to remember a little at a time, slow, drop by drop, the way you taught me on the first day with the nail. It'll take all winter, maybe longer, that's all right, the work is slow. He looked up at Nicolas, restored, watching from the cellar stair. You could do it faster, you've got the strength and I haven't. But I think it should be me, and it should be slow, because that's the whole answer to what he was, isn't it? He killed it fast because he did everything fast, so it should come back slow. It should come back the opposite of how it died. And Nicolas Flamel, who could have renewed the spring in a night with the stone and 6 centuries of skill, sat down on the cold cellar stair and folded his scarred hands and said, yes. It should be you, and it should be slow, and I will sit here and watch you do it and hand you nothing, because you are right, and because there is nothing I could teach you now that would be worth more than the teaching you will give yourself down here this winter, drop by drop, coaxing a dead thing back toward the living. Go on, heir of the seeing, ask the water to remember. I will keep you company and keep the fire upstairs and grow old on the stair watching you, which is the finest way I can think of to spend a winter, and I have spent a great many. So Harry spent that winter in the cold cellar with his hands on the leaden water, asking it patiently day by day, drop by drop, to remember that it had been alive. And slowly, so slowly that no single day showed it, the gray drew down and the clear came up, a thread of living water, then a wash, then a rill, the spring climbing back up out of its own death the way the matter climbs up out of the negrito, the going up after the going down. Until by the first green of spring the source ran clean and cold and living again over the boy's cupped hands, and tasted, when he drank it, of the deep rock and the clean dark and the whole safe world, and the floors went warm again, and the house's heart beat again, brought back not fast and not by power but slow, and by a patient hand and by love, which is the only thing that ever brings anything back. There were mornings that winter when nothing showed for a whole day's work, when the leaden water lay under his hands exactly as dead at dusk as it had been at dawn, and the old restlessness rose in him, the whisper to push, to force, to reach for the stone on the Athanor and turn the spring in a single night and be done. And every one of those mornings he answered the whisper the same way, out loud on his knees in the cold cellar, the words worn smooth now by 5 years of his own mouth. The work is slow, the tending is almost nothing, but it's everything. Warmth wins. He had beaten the whisper at the boundary too late, and at the fire in time, and now he beat it here every single morning on purpose, choosing the slow road over the fast one, not because the fast one had failed him, but because he had finally understood all the way down that the slow road was not the price of the art. It was the art, it was the whole of it. Mercer had died of not knowing that, gone to gray dust reaching for a thing a patient hand could have simply held. Harry knelt in the cold and asked the water to remember, and did not hurry it, and grew, that winter, more than the spring did. It was on one of those cellar evenings, with the spring half returned and singing faintly under his hands, that they spoke at last of the thing that waited under everything, which was that the Flamels would not, in the end, live forever, and had never meant to. "We have known for a long time, Perenelle and I," Nicholas said quietly on the stair, "that we would one day let the stone go, not be taken from it, let it go of our own choosing and make our peace and stop the way everything that lives must one day stop, because a thing that never stops is a thing like Mercer, and we did not want in the end to be things like Mercer. 600 years is a very long time, Harry. It is long enough to see everything twice and to grow tired in a way that no elixir cures, and to begin, quietly, to look forward to the great ordinary dark the way a person at the end of a long good day looks forward to sleep. We were nearly ready before you came. We had begun to speak of it. And then Albus set a half-starved child on our hearthrug at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we found we were not ready after all, because there was suddenly a reason to stay a while longer to see how you turned out, to teach you the next thing and the next." He was quiet a moment. "So you have bought us time, do you see? Not with the elixir, with yourself. You have made two very old people who were ready to stop want to go on a little, just to be near you, just to see. That is a gift you gave us without knowing you gave it, and it is worth more than the stone. And I will tell you now the thing I have known since your first night under this roof, and have been waiting until you were old enough to hear. You were never our apprentice, or not only that, and you were never only our heir. You are the child we were 600 years too wise to let ourselves have, and we had you anyway, foolishly, gladly, and it is the best foolish thing either of us ever did." Perenelle, who had come down the cellar stair with a lamp and stood listening at the turn of it, set the lamp on the step and spoke then, and her voice had the tartness in it that she kept for the things too large to say softly. "He makes it sound very grand, and it was not grand. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and you had wet through your coat, and you would not unclench your fists in your sleep, and I sat up with you because someone had to, and by dawn I had already lost the argument I had been having with myself for 600 years about never again loving a small perishable thing. That is the truth of it, not grand, only certain." She came down the last steps and looked at the spring half returned under the boy's hands, the clear thread climbing up through the gray, and at the boy himself, and her dark eyes were quick and bright and unafraid, always unafraid, which was the thing about her Harry had kept from the very first and would keep to the end. "You want to know what it means, that you are our legacy and not the stone. I will tell you plainly, because he never will. He wraps everything in 100 years of philosophy. It means that when we do let the stone go at last, whenever that is, and it will not be soon, we will not be leaving the world a treasure for men to kill each other over. We will be leaving it you, a person who held the most wanted thing on earth in his open hand and gave it away and wanted nothing. That is what we made down all these years instead of gold. That is the real great work, little one, the only one that was ever worth 600 years, not the stone, you. And you turned out, and it took, and it was worth every day." Harry did not have a name-size thank you for that either. He had learned long ago that there was no such thing, and that the not having was not a lack but a kind of honesty. So he did the thing he did instead, the thing this house had taught him on his very first night, with a blue tin and a warmed bed and an open hand. He kept it. He took the whole of it, the ash and the giving and the spring and the 600 years and the words on the cellar stair, and he kept it, out in the open where it could not be taken, and it was his, and it always would be. The letter came in the last week of July, on Harry's 11th birthday, and it came the ordinary way, in the beak of a tawny owl that dropped it on the breakfast table between the honey and the fresh warm bread. He had been expecting it. Perenelle had promised it to him years before, brushing rain out of his hair. "There is a school. When you are 11, you will go among your own kind." And here it was, heavy cream parchment, his name in green ink, Mr. H. Potter, the small bedroom under the north eaves, La Source, and under the address, because the school always knew exactly where its children were even when the rest of the world had lost the map, and Harry turned it over in his hands and did not open it at once, because he had learned to take the moments that mattered slowly. "You'll go," said Perenelle. It was not quite a question. She had her tart carrying voice on, the one she used when a thing mattered too much to say softly, and her dark eyes were bright. "You'll go, and you'll be too much for some of them and exactly enough for a few, and the few are the whole point, they are always the whole point. And you'll come back every summer to the bees and the spring and two old fools who will count the days, and you'll bring us the stories, and one day you'll be too grown and too busy and you'll come back only sometimes, and that is right too, that is the tree standing up in the wind, and we will be glad of it and not say a word about the days between. That is what a root is for, little one. We told you. It grows deep in the dark and the quiet so that the tree can stand up one day in the light and the company of other trees. You have been a root long enough. Go and be a tree. We will be here." Harry opened the letter and read it, and it was full of ordinary wonderful things, lists of books and robes and a cauldron pewter, standard size too, and he thought of the great renewal and the Athanor and the philosopher's egg and smiled at the pewter cauldron, standard size too, and thought that he would not tell them at the school, not at first, what he already knew, because Nicholas had said the school would teach him the part of his education that could not be taught at La Source. Which was the part about other people, and you do not learn the part about other people by telling them all at once that you helped renew the philosopher's stone at 8. You learn it slowly. You learn it by being for a while an ordinary boy with an extraordinary secret and a good ear for the small print of a room, and Harry was very good at secrets and very good at small print, and he thought, turning the letter in his hands, that he might be all right at the part about other people, given time, given patience, given the slow way. Dumbledore would be there, of course. The quiet interest of 6 years, the sherbet lemon and the orchard question and the pale weighing eyes come round at last to its purpose. The boy would come to the school, and the old headmaster would finish, gently, carefully, the raising that Nicholas and Perenelle had begun, and there would be new things, hard things, a whole world of them waiting beyond the green coombe, and a cold knot and a scar that no one had yet solved, and that would want solving. But that was all ahead, and the beauty of 11 is that ahead is a country you have not yet had to enter, and Harry sat at the breakfast table on the morning of his 11th birthday with the letter in his hands, and did not think yet about the country ahead. He thought about the copper-flowered nail he still kept in a box in the small bedroom under the north eaves, the first true thing he had ever owned, the rusty iron that a patient hand had asked to remember it was once something brighter. He thought about the blue tin, long since become a shared and ordinary thing that had taught him the difference between a hoard that rots and a gift that feeds. He thought about the ring, the worn green stone of the line of the seeing, that his hand was very nearly grown to now. He thought about the spring running clean again under the house because he had asked it, all one winter, drop by patient drop, to remember. He thought about the fire he had kept through the longest night, and the stone he had held and not wanted and given away, and the 2 ancient people across the table from him who had taken in a frightened stranger's child against all their own hard wisdom and made of him, patiently, across 6 years, a person. He looked up from the letter. The morning light came gold through the kitchen window and lay on the honey and the warm bread and the 2 old faces he loved. Out in the walled garden the bees were up and loud in the July flowers. Down under the floor the spring ran clean and cold and living, keeping its own time, keeping the house's heart. And on the warm flank of the Athanor, behind the black oak door that a keeper had rebuilt board by board across the spring, the philosopher's stone glowed soft and low and endless, safe, guarded now by a hand that wanted nothing from it, which is the only hand that ever kept anything safe. "I'll go," Harry said. "And I'll come back every summer, I promise." He reached for the warm bread and the honey that tasted of the whole summer at once, and he broke the bread and passed the first piece to Perenelle and the second to Nicholas, because that was how you did it in this house. You fed everyone. It was the oldest law there was, older than the school, older than the stone, older than the work. "Now," he said in his ordinary voice, an ordinary boy at an ordinary breakfast with an extraordinary secret and all the time in the world, "somebody pass the butter, and tell me again about the pupil you had before me, the one who wanted to know how the world was put together underneath. I want to hear the good parts." And Nicolas Flamel laughed, the real laugh, the one that ran all the lines of his face upward at once, and Perenelle's dark eyes were bright, and Corbeau chuckled deep in his throat from the back of a chair, and the sun came in gold, and the bees hummed, and the spring ran, and the fire was kept. Chapter 7 End.